How to Train Your Dragon, Finding a Black Dragon Egg from Monster Hunter. Chapter 1. Whoosh. A sound of tearing air ripped through the night, carrying scorching heat waves, as a fiery red fireball streaked across the ink-black sky like a falling meteor. With a loud bang, the fireball slammed into the roof of a wooden hut on the edge of Burke Island, exploding into sparks that scattered like meteorite fragments, instantly igniting the dry wooden beams. Dancing flames licked at the eaves, casting distorted shadows on the muddy ground, and illuminating a curled-up, youthful figure in the mud. The young man wore a stained coarse cloth cloak, dark red blood beads seeped from his forehead, mixed with specks of dirt clinging to his face. His long eyelashes trembled violently, and a low, muffled groan escaped his throat, as if he was enduring unspeakable agony. The icy mud soaked through his thin clothes, and the biting cold brought his muddled consciousness back slightly. He propped himself up on the hard, cold mud with trembling arms, his knuckles white from the effort, struggling to sit up and look around blankly. Where am I? No sooner had he spoken than a tearing pain suddenly erupted from his temples, as if countless steel needles were stirring in his skull. Ah! The young man shrieked in pain, clutching his head with both hands, pressing his fingertips hard against his throbbing temples. His body trembled uncontrollably from the agony, almost collapsing to the ground again. Confused fragments of memory flooded his mind, the bustling traffic of a modern city, his grandmother's relieved smile before her death, his light steps after a successful interview, and the out-of-control car rushing towards him, its headlights blinding, the drunken, distorted face in the driver's seat. Lin. A name clearly emerged in his mind, followed by another torrent of unfamiliar memories. I remember. Lin gasped for breath, cold sweat trickling down his cheeks, mixing with the mud. Shouldn't he have died in that car accident? How did he end up here? The memories in his mind gradually became clear. This was the world of How to Train Your Dragon, and the original owner of this body was also named Lin, a native Viking teenager from Burke Island, a close friend of Hiccup's with whom he had caused trouble since childhood. The original owner's parents were attacked by pirates during a fishing trip and unfortunately died, leaving him to live alone on the island. The cause of the original owner's death was precisely the shockwave from the fireball explosion just now, which sent him slamming into the stone wall of the wooden hut, killing him instantly, and coincidentally giving Lin from the modern world a chance to be reborn. So I transmigrated. Lin shook his dizzy head, trying to process this absurd yet real situation. The noisy shouts, the crackling of the burning hut, and the roars of dragons occasionally sweeping across the sky, all told him that this was not a dream. Just then, urgent shouts came from not far away. Quick, someone! Fire over here! Lin looked in the direction of the sound, seeing several familiar figures running through the flames with wooden buckets, Astrid with her high ponytail and sharp eyes, the sturdy and somewhat clumsy Fishlegs, the arrogant Toughnut, and the siblings Roughnut and Toughnut, all strenuously splashing water from their buckets onto the burning wooden hut. Lin's heart stirred, and he struggled to his feet. Although the severe headache had not subsided, and his body was somewhat weak from the original owner's injuries, the Viking's naturally robust physique still allowed him to move. He staggered to the hut, grabbed an unused wooden bucket, and quickly ran to the nearby river. After filling the bucket, he turned and ran back to the fire. The heavy bucket made his arms ache, but he didn't slow down at all. 1 bucket, 2 buckets, 3 buckets. He and the others fought against the raging flames. The scorching heat waves baked his skin, and the thick smoke made him cough constantly, but he didn't stop. With everyone's combined effort, the spreading fire was gradually suppressed, leaving only wisps of black smoke and sizzling wet wood. Lin leaned on the wooden bucket, panting heavily, his chest rising and falling violently. I didn't expect the Viking's physique to be as outrageous as in the anime, he thought to himself in surprise. After such severe injuries, and helping to put out the fire for so long, I'm only exhausted, not passed out directly. Hey, Lin, you don't look so good. A clear voice sounded beside him. Astrid put down her wooden bucket and walked up to him, her brows slightly furrowed, her gaze falling on the bloodstain on his forehead, her tone clearly concerned. Are you hurt? Are you okay? Lin looked up, met Astrid's bright eyes, forced a pale smile, and waved his hand. I'm fine, just a little tired. I might have been hit by the shockwave just now. After a short rest, his strength somewhat recovered, Lin stood up and looked towards the center of the island. In the distant open ground, a group of tall and burly Vikings were wielding axes, hammers, and spears, roaring as they charged into the sky, their metal weapons gleaming coldly in the firelight. In the sky, several grayish-brown Gronkle dragons were slowly circling. Their wings seemed a bit small compared to their massive bodies, and their flight posture was slightly clumsy, yet they still carried a chilling sense of oppression. The Gronkle dragons occasionally opened their mouths, spitting out scorching lava fireballs. Lin remembered that these dragons fed on rocks, and the high temperature in their stomachs could melt rocks into magma, which was the secret behind their lava-spewing fireballs. Just as he was observing the battle, a sharp sound of tearing air suddenly came from above, more urgent than the Gronkle's flight sound. Lin abruptly looked up, only to see a slender dragon with a tail covered in sharp spikes diving towards them. It was a deadly natter. At the tip of its tail, several sharp spikes had fully spread out, glinting coldly, a signal that it was about to attack. Look out! It's a deadly natter. Fishlegs cried out in alarm, instinctively taking a step back. Just then, a deafening shout came from the catapult platform not far away. Quick, use the catapult. Shoot it down. It was Stoik, the Viking chief, who shouted. He was tall and burly, with a thick beard, wielding a massive iron hammer, his eyes as sharp as an eagle's. The Vikings on the platform immediately sprang into action. Several of them together lifted a millstone-sized boulder onto the catapult sling, while others tightly gripped the ropes, pulling back with all their might. With a piercing whoosh, the boulder shot into the air like an arrow from a bow, heading straight for the diving deadly natter with thunderous force. Bang! The boulder accurately hit the deadly natter's left wing, followed by a mournful shriek. The deadly natter lost its balance and plummeted straight to the ground like a kite with a broken string, crashing heavily into the mud and kicking up a cloud of dust. Seeing this, the surrounding Vikings immediately surrounded the injured dragon with weapons drawn, quickly bringing it under control. But the danger was not yet over. A low roar, vibrating one's eardrums, suddenly echoed from the sky. Two massive black figures emerged from the clouds, instantly engulfing a large area. Lin's heart tightened. It was a deadly natter and an inferno dragon. The deadly natter had a thick neck, and its two heads moved independently, each pair of eyes flashing with different ferocity, clearly possessing two independent brains capable of devising different tactics simultaneously. One of its heads opened its mouth and spewed a pale green gas, while the other head quickly rubbed its sharp teeth together, producing sparks that instantly ignited the gas. With a boom, green flames exploded in the air, forming a scorching sea of fire that spread towards the ground. The inferno dragon next to it was even more terrifying. Its body was larger than the deadly natter's, covered in dark red scales, with sparks occasionally escaping from the gaps between its scales, as if its entire body was ablaze. It opened its cavernous mouth, and a thick pillar of flame erupted, instantly igniting everything in its path. The ground was scorched black, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of burning. The inferno dragon's target was directly the catapult platform where Stoik was. Its massive body, with destructive momentum, charged straight towards the platform. The wooden platform groaned under its impact, and several supporting wooden pillars instantly broke. Stoik reacted extremely quickly. He roared, gripping his iron hammer with both hands, and using the dragon's diving momentum, he swung the hammer with all his might, smashing it hard against the inferno dragon's head. Bang! With a deafening crash, sparks flew as the hammer collided with the dragon's scales. The inferno dragon cried out in pain, its massive head twisted violently, and its body lost balance, rolling off the shaky platform and crashing heavily to the ground, letting out an angry roar. But it wasn't too badly injured. It shook its huge head, flicked its burning body, and slowly stood up again, its violent eyes fixed on Stoik on the platform, clearly preparing for a second attack. The surrounding Vikings immediately raised their weapons, forming a defensive line, the atmosphere so tense it was almost suffocating. Suddenly, an extremely sharp shriek cut through the night sky, more piercing than any dragon's sound. Lin abruptly looked in the direction of the sound, only to see a ghostly blue fireball darting out of the clouds, moving so fast it left afterimages, crashing directly into another catapult platform. Boom! The violent explosion was deafening. The platform was instantly engulfed in blue flames, its wooden structure collapsed with a roar, and shattered stone and wood splinters, mixed with flames, flew everywhere. It's a night fury. Someone shouted first, their voice filled with terror, instantly spreading across the entire battlefield. Lin's pupils suddenly contracted. The Night Fury, the most mysterious and dangerous of all dragons, as fast as lightning, capable of firing incredibly powerful plasma blasts, and no one had ever truly seen its appearance, because its entire body was covered in hard scales as deep as night, without any other colors, and it only appeared at night, like a ghost moving through the darkness. Scenes from the movie flashed through his mind. He knew this was the moment the story truly began. Everyone was somewhat panicked by the Night Fury's sudden attack, momentarily forgetting to retaliate. Just then, a familiar voice rang out. Don't panic, everyone. Watch me. Lin looked in the direction of the voice and saw Hiccup rushing out from Gobber's forge, pushing a self-made crossbow cart. He was thin and seemed somewhat frail compared to other Viking teenagers, but at this moment, his eyes burned with an ardent light, a determination to prove himself by killing the most powerful dragon. Hiccup pushed the heavy crossbow cart, struggling to reach a higher patch of grass. He deftly secured the crossbow's stand and loaded a special bola arrow into the slot. He squinted, his eyes fixed on the Night Fury's trajectory as it weaved through the air, his finger on the trigger, his body trembling slightly from excitement and tension. Lin, as if by some impulse, followed him. He knew what was going to happen next. Hiccup would hit the Night Fury. The Night Fury let out another shriek, turning back like a black lightning bolt and diving towards the high ground where Hiccup was, the sound of its wings cutting through the air piercingly sharp. Hiccup took a deep breath, sharply pulled the crossbow's mechanism, and the bola arrow shot towards the Night Fury with a whistling sound. The Night Fury's reaction was astonishingly fast. It deftly dodged to the side, and the arrow grazed its wing, embedding itself heavily in a distant rock. The enraged Night Fury let out an angry roar, changed direction, its eerie green eyes locking onto Hiccup, and began to accumulate energy. A ghostly blue light glowed in its throat, a sign that a plasma blast was about to be fired. Hiccup did not flinch. He quickly recocked the crossbow and aimed at the Night Fury again, his gaze more resolute than that of a mere boy. Careful. Lin's heart leapt into his throat at the sight. Without thinking, he pushed off the ground with all his strength, splashing 2 clumps of wet mud, and lunged towards Hiccup like an arrow released from a bow. Just as the Night Fury's plasma blast erupted with a roar, and the ghostly blue energy ball shot towards Hiccup with destructive force, Hiccup also pulled the trigger, and the second bola arrow sped out. Lin's lunge arrived just in time. He grabbed Hiccup's waist, and the two of them tumbled onto the soft grass. Lin instinctively protected the back of his own head with one hand, while the other hand firmly pressed Hiccup's head, holding him beneath himself, pressed tightly against the ground. Boom. The instant the dark blue plasma beam grazed past their heads, the bola shot by Hiccup coincidentally struck the Night Fury's right wing. The iron balls, making a sharp whistling sound, wrapped tightly around the Night Fury's wing due to inertia. The exceptionally tough rope connecting the iron balls firmly bound the Night Fury. Roar. The Night Fury let out a painful roar. With its bound wings unable to spread, its massive body instantly lost balance and plunged toward the back mountains of Burke Island like a kite with a broken string. The black silhouette quickly vanished into the night. Lin and Hiccup propped themselves up, sitting on the ground. Before they could wipe the cold sweat from their brows, they witnessed this scene. Hiccup suddenly turned his head, his eyes filled with incredible surprise. He grabbed Lin's arm and shook it excitedly. Lin. Did you see that? I hit the Night Fury. I really hit it. And just now, thank you for saving me. You almost died just now. Lin slapped his hand away, still shaken, the stinging pain of the plasma beam burn lingering on his back. In the original plot, Hiccup wasn't attacked by the Night Fury. It seems my transmigration really changed something. He pondered internally, his gaze unconsciously drifting toward where the Night Fury fell, feeling that things wouldn't be so simple. Whoosh whoosh. A scorching breath suddenly assailed them from behind, carrying the smell of sulfur and charcoal. But as it brushed past their necks, it sent chills down their spines. Lin's hairs instantly stood on end. He spun around, only to see the inferno dragon that Stoic had knocked down earlier had somehow broken free. It was thrashing its burning body, its scarlet eyes fixed on them. Saliva dropped down its sharp fangs, burning small pits into the grass. We're done for. Hiccup. Run. Lin's pupils contracted. He scrambled to his feet and dragged Hiccup up. Ah! Hiccup's scream pierced the night sky. The two stumbled toward the village. Lin had already expended a great deal of energy due to his previous injuries and fighting the fire. Now, his legs felt weak, and every step felt like he was overdrawing his strength, but the footsteps of the Inferno Dragon behind them grew closer and closer. The Inferno Dragon opened its gaping maw and lunged to bite Lin's backside. The scorching breath was almost upon him. Lin instinctively tightened his core, narrowly dodging the bite, breaking out in a cold sweat. Hey! That's dishonorable. Why bite my butt of all places? Help! In the distance, Stoic, who was directing the Viking warriors to resist the dragon swarm, heard the cries for help. Following the sound, he saw Lin and Hiccup being chased frantically by the Inferno Dragon. His gaze sharpened. He abruptly hoisted his great axe onto his shoulder and sprinted toward the two boys. Seeing this, the Viking warriors along the way also raised their weapons and followed. Lin and Hiccup stumbled into the village, maneuvering around obstacles like wooden houses and fences, trying to slow down the Inferno Dragon. But this dragon was clearly enraged. Its massive body smashed through the fences of several wooden houses. Flames splashed everywhere with its movements, and the cries of the villagers mingled with the roars of the dragon. The two fled all the way to the cylindrical totem pole in the center of the village. The mysterious patterns carved on the totem appeared particularly ferocious in the firelight. Lin tripped, his pant leg catching on the raised pattern of the totem's base. He fell heavily to the ground, his knee hitting a stone, making him gasp sharply in pain. The moment he looked up, the figure of the Inferno Dragon magnified in his pupils. Lin hurriedly backed away until his back pressed against the totem pole. The dragon had already caught up, its open mouth full of fangs. Orange-red flames were condensing in its throat, and the scorching heat wave was practically singeing his hair. Lin! Hiccup's shout came from behind. He had already run a few steps away, but hearing the commotion, he looked back and saw this life and death situation. The young man, who usually couldn't even hold an axe steady, seemed to be ignited by a sudden courage. He spun around and rushed back, spreading his arms to shield Lin. His tightly closed eyes trembled slightly from fear, yet he grit his teeth firmly, refusing to retreat. Stop! Seeing this scene, Lin's roar exploded over the village of Burke Island like a clap of thunder, carrying the desperation and unwillingness of a man facing death. The instant the sound burst from his throat, he felt as if a flame that had slept for 1,000 years was ignited in his chest. A scorching power he had never felt before surged wildly through his veins, spreading from his heart to all his limbs. This power clashed and swirled within his body, finally transforming into an invisible wave of air that violently spread outwards from him. The gravel on the ground was swept up, the surrounding wooden fences groaned, and even the sulphurous smell lingering in the air was partially dispersed by this aura. The flames condensing in the Inferno Dragon's throat abruptly froze, and a hint of astonishment flashed in its eyes, which were burning with orange-red fury. The aura that erupted from Lin's body held no fierce killing intent, yet it carried a pressure that transcended all other creatures, like the roar of an ancient giant dragon, instinctively causing fear in a dragon accustomed to tyranny like itself. Hiccup froze in place, his tightly closed eyes waiting in vain for the expected searing pain. He trembled and opened one eye a crack, only to see a sight he would never forget. The Inferno Dragon's massive body was slightly hunched, its previously ferocious head instinctively bowed low, and a low whimper sounded in its throat, as if it were wary of something. Behind him, Lin's eyes emitted a faint blue halo. Although he was still sprawled on the ground, he radiated an aura that was impossible to look at directly. His face, originally pale from exhaustion, was now flushed with an abnormal redness. Odin above. This is. Hiccup was too stunned to speak. His hands were still held open, but his body was trembling slightly from the shock. Lin himself was bewildered. He could clearly feel the presence of that power within him. It was no longer violently surging but gradually stabilizing, flowing slowly through his meridians, bringing an unprecedented sense of fullness. He slowly stood up, propping himself on the ground. The pain in his knee seemed to have lessened somewhat. When he looked up at the Inferno Dragon before him, he realized that this dragon, which had been so fierce just moments ago, was truly subdued. Its scarlet eyes were filled with wariness and hesitation, completely lacking its previous arrogance. Just then, a flurry of hurried footsteps approached from afar. Stoic, holding his great axe, rushed over with several Viking warriors. He was stunned by the scene before him. Hiccup. Lin. Are you two all right? He shouted sternly, his great axe already raised above his head, ready to intervene at any moment. Hearing Stoic's voice, the Inferno dragon snapped back to reality, and the fear in its eyes was replaced by anger. It let out a reluctant roar, seemingly trying to break through the invisible pressure, but when its gaze fell upon Lin again, its body involuntarily flinched. Finally, after weighing its options for a moment, it reluctantly flicked its burning tail, turned, and flapped its wings, flying toward the sky outside the village, leaving behind only a gust of wind and widespread wreckage. Only when the Inferno dragon's silhouette completely vanished into the horizon did the aura inside Lin slowly recede, and the blue halo in his eyes gradually faded. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the ground again, panting heavily. The recent explosion of power had nearly drained all his strength. His clothes were soaked with cold sweat, clinging to his skin, chilling him to the bone. Lin, are you okay? Hiccup rushed over, supporting his shoulders, his eyes filled with worry and admiration. What was that just now? That was incredible. You actually subdued an Inferno dragon. Stoic also quickly walked forward, scrutinizing Lin with a serious expression, his brow furrowed. Son, just now, what was that? He had lived for so many years and seen countless Viking warriors, but he had never seen anyone capable of making a dragon retreat simply by releasing an aura. This was not the strength an ordinary Viking should possess. Lin opened his mouth, but didn't know how to explain. Since transmigrating to this world, his only advantage had been knowing the plot's trajectory. He had never imagined he would possess such power. Could it be that the desperate situation just now activated some hidden talent within his body? He looked up toward the back mountains of Burke Island. The spot where the night fury fell was silent now, with only scattered firelight flickering in the darkness. And what kind of changes would the power that suddenly awakened within him bring to him, to Hiccup, and even to all of Burke Island? Lin took a deep breath, suppressing the confusion and unease in his heart. He shook his head at Stoic. I don't know, Chieftain Stoic. I just didn't want Hiccup to get hurt, and then, a power suddenly appeared. Stoic remained silent for a moment, then heavily patted his shoulder, his tone carrying some approval. Regardless, you saved yourself and you saved Hiccup. Burke Island will remember you. Lin nodded, his gaze once again directed toward the distance. He knew that from the moment that power erupted, his life trajectory, and this formerly familiar Burke Island, would be completely different. The fallen Night Fury, as well as the power that suddenly awakened within him, seemed to be pushing him and Burke Island toward an unknown future. Just then, a strange aura suddenly emanated from underground, carrying an indescribable attraction. This aura was neither scorching nor cold. Instead, it held an ancient warmth, faintly echoing the power that had just erupted, like two streams from the same source quietly resonating. Lin subconsciously clenched his fists, trying to resist this sudden attraction, but found the aura growing clearer, as if something underground was silently calling to him. He looked down at the ground. There seemed to be an ancient presence echoing his inner strength from afar. What's wrong, Lin? Hiccup noticed his unusual behavior and followed his gaze to the ground, but saw nothing. Lin shook his head, the confusion in his heart deepening. What exactly was this aura? What was hidden underground? He vaguely felt that this might be inextricably linked to his transmigration, the power within him, and this world full of dragons. Just as Lin was deep in thought, clang. With a sharp sound, everyone was startled and turned their heads abruptly. The temporarily fixed warning torch at the village entrance, damaged when a monstrous nightmare passed by, had its wooden pole's base snap. The entire pole, trailing sparks, crashed straight to the ground. The iron brazier at the top detached with a whoosh, scattering crimson embers everywhere. The brazier itself, like an out-of-control wheel, rolled clattering along the uneven stone path, heading towards the fence on the east side. There, 3 large nets woven from thick hemp rope enclosed 3 deadly natters. Their grayish-blue wings flapped incessantly, sharp claws scratching the hemp rope, causing fibers to shed. Their eyes were filled with anxious ferocity. The brazier hit the fence post with a thump. Sparks flew, landing on the hemp ropes trapping the 3 dragons, instantly igniting half-a-foot-high flames. The hemp ropes, encountering fire, quickly shriveled and broke. The originally tight mesh soon developed fist-sized holes, which then tore into large gaps under the deadly Natter's struggles. The three deadly Natters paused, a flicker of surprise in their amber eyes. Then, they reacted, violently breaking through the damaged nets, flapping their wings to stir up a gust of hot wind. Their sharp screeches pierced the twilight as they sped towards the back mountain, their wings kicking up several pieces of charred hemp rope debris as they skimmed the ground. Just then, the clouds on the horizon were suddenly dyed, and the setting sun finally broke free from the gray cloud's embrace. A golden-red cascade of light poured down, plating the wooden houses and reefs of Burke Island with a warm glow. Lin looked up. In the distant sky, flocks of dragons plundering sheep formed a loose formation, the sheep in their claws hanging their heads, long drained of the strength to struggle. The entire dragon flock, facing the afterglow of the setting sun, their wings passing through the light current, gradually shrank into blurry black dots, finally disappearing completely into the horizon in the direction of the dragon's nest, leaving behind only the sky full of rosy clouds and the lingering smell of char in the village. The sunset's afterglow spilled over the ravaged village. Hiccup clutched the crumpled corner of his clothes, his voice tinged with timidity. But, I hit a night fury. Stoic frowned. He grabbed Hiccup's collar and lifted him, walking him out of the crowd. Hiccup's feet were off the ground, but he still struggled to explain. This time it's different. Before, I only saw dragons from afar, but this time I really did it. I can prove it. Lin saw it too. Just then, Lin stood up and quickly walked to Stoic, looking at the chief and saying, yes. I can prove that Hiccup did hit a night fury just now. Enough. Stop talking. Stoic suddenly let go, and Hiccup staggered back 2 steps. He pointed at the messy village, his voice suddenly rising, his eyes filled with exhaustion and impatience. Look at this. The dragons stole the sheep and ran off. Winter is almost here. I have to oversee reinforcing defenses, calculate the remaining food, and feed a whole village. Every time you come out, you're either being chased by dragons or causing a pile of trouble. Don't you see how busy I am? Hiccup, startled by his father's roar, opened his mouth and looked around, saying, maybe people don't have such big appetites, right? As soon as Hiccup finished speaking, Stoic's face instantly darkened. He stared at Hiccup, his tone full of disappointment. Don't joke, Hiccup. Can saving food solve all problems? Can the harsh winter be endured by not having a big appetite? He paused, then turned his gaze to Lin, his voice softening a bit, but with an undeniable seriousness. Lin, I know you and Hiccup are close, but don't ignore the current trouble just to help him. The most important thing now is to clean up the mess in the village. With that, Stoic shouted to Gobber, who was checking the damaged fence nearby. Gobber. Gobber immediately put down his work and quickly walked over, saying, Chief, what are your orders? Take these 2 children back together, keep an eye on them, don't let them cause any more trouble, Stoic said, pointing at Hiccup and Lin, his tone weary but firm. Gobber nodded, stepped forward, and said to Hiccup and Lin, come on, let's go back. Hiccup wanted to say something more, but Lin gently tugged his sleeve. Lin shook his head at him, signaling him not to argue further. Hiccup watched Stoic's retreating back as he went to busy himself, then looked at the messy village, and finally bit his lip, following Gobber towards the wooden house. Lin followed closely behind, watching the gloomy and grumbling Hiccup ahead, thinking to himself, today Hiccup will go to Crow's Ridge in the back mountain to find Toothless. Should I go with him to see? Back home, the wooden door closed with a creak, shutting out the village's clamor. Lin sighed in relief, leaning against the door, his mind replaying the scene of his power outburst during the day, the burning sensation surging from his chest, and the intimidating pressure that made the monstrous nightmare fearful, still as clear as if it had just happened. He walked to the bed and sat down, placing his hands gently on his knees. He closed his eyes, trying to feel the power within his body again. At first, there was only ordinary fatigue, but as he calmed down and focused on his chest, a faint warmth slowly emerged. The warmth flowed slowly through his blood vessels, like a tiny stream, and wherever it went, the fatigue dissipated a bit. Just then, Lin suddenly felt that a similar energy seemed to be lingering around him. The energy was faint, but it didn't have the ancient aura from before. It seemed to emanate from the ground beneath his feet, gently enveloping his body. His heart stirred, recalling his experience of being drawn by the underground aura. Could this energy be related to the mysterious power beneath the earth? He didn't interrupt the flow of warmth within him, letting the power slowly course through his meridians. From his chest to his arms, then to his legs, and finally back to his chest, forming a complete cycle. The moment the power completed a full circuit, the underground energy around him suddenly moved, as if attracted by the warmth within his body. It approached his body in wisps and strands, then gently seeped into his skin, integrating into his meridians. Lin could clearly feel that the warmth within him instantly intensified by several points. The original blue halo flashed in his eyes, and Lin saw a faint blue light cluster in his consciousness become clearer and more solid. He opened his eyes and looked at his hands. What exactly is this power? Lin murmured to himself, filled with confusion. After absorbing the underground energy, he felt his body was lighter, and the fatigue from his previous power outburst had completely disappeared. He stood up and tried to clench his fists, feeling a faint but real power gathering in his palms. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark night sky, towards the back mountain where the aura was even more distinct. Lin's eyes became resolute. No matter what this power is, I'll go to the back mountain to see after dawn. Maybe I'll find more answers. In the great hall of Burke Island, a roaring bonfire blazed, its light casting a warm glow across the massive space. This hall, constructed entirely of granite, was a source of Viking pride, with heavy stone pillars adorned with intricate carvings. In the center of the hall, a bonfire, enclosed by stones of similar size, licked at the firewood with leaping flames. Amidst the crackling, a measure of warmth was sent to every corner of the hall, yet it couldn't dispel the chill in the villagers' hearts. Stoic stood before a stone table by the bonfire, his tall figure casting a long shadow in the firelight. His hands rested on the cold stone table, his gaze sweeping over the seated villagers. His voice was low but powerful. As you all know, today the dragons took our sheep for the winter. Without enough food and wool, this winter will be exceptionally difficult for us, and some might not make it through, remaining forever in the cold winter. As his words fell, a brief silence descended upon the hall, with only the sound of the bonfire burning echoing in the air. The villagers lowered their heads, some clenching their fists, their faces filled with worry and anger. After a moment, Stoic continued, to survive, we cannot sit idly by. I have decided to send troops to find the dragon's nest and destroy it completely. Only then can we eliminate future troubles and free Burke Island from the harassment of the dragon hordes. Chief, no. No sooner had he finished speaking than a wrinkled old Viking stood up, his voice full of apprehension. We've sent people to look for the dragon's nest before, but not a single ship that departed ever returned. The old Viking's words resonated with many villagers, who nodded in agreement. Yes, chief, it's too risky. Let's think of other ways, like fishing further out at sea, or foraging for wild fruit in the mountains. Stoic took a deep breath, his gaze firm as he looked at everyone. Fishing and foraging for wild fruit are simply not enough to sustain the entire tribe through winter. This time is different. We will deploy all our ships and concentrate all our strength to depart, determined to destroy the dragon's nest. This is our only way out. Now, who is willing to come with me? Raise your hand. He finished, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, waiting for their response. The hall fell silent again, the villagers looking at each other, their faces full of hesitation. After a long while, only a few young and strong Viking warriors hesitantly raised their hands, a meager number. Most villagers still kept their heads down, motionless. Stoic looked at the scene before him. Though he felt a sense of loss, he did not show it. He was silent for a moment, then slowly spoke. Those who stay behind have a more important task to take good care of Hiccup and wait for our return. Unexpectedly, as soon as Stoic's words fell, the villagers in the hall almost simultaneously raised their hands. Even the old Viking who had been hesitating just now raised his arm high. The hesitation on everyone's faces disappeared, replaced by determined expressions. Stoic watched as everyone raised their hands, then said in a deep voice, very good. Everyone, prepare your weapons and equipment, and get the ships ready to depart for the dragon's nest. The villagers rose and left the great hall one after another, the heavy leather boots clattering on the stone floor, their footsteps gradually fading away. The bonfire still flickered, but it made the empty hall feel even more silent. Stoic stood still, watching the villagers leave until the last person walked out the door, then turned to look at Gobber, who was preparing to depart. He hurried forward and patted Gobber's shoulder. Gobber, stay behind. Gobber's tankard, attached to his prosthetic arm, was placed on the stone table. He turned back in confusion. Chief, something else. Aren't we supposed to prepare weapons and ships? I still need to check the reinforcement of the ships. Stoic shook his head, his gaze solemn. You don't need to come with us this time. I want you to stay behind and train Hiccup and Lin. Gobber was startled and quickly declined. That won't do. Destroying the dragon's nest requires manpower, and I'm experienced. I can be of more help if I go. As for Hiccup, other villagers can watch him. After saying that, he glanced away, then pretended to be serious as he took a sip of the drink in his tankard. Precisely because you are the most experienced, you need to stay, Stoic interrupted him, his tone sincere. You know Hiccup and Lin. You are the most formidable dragon slayer in the tribe, and only you can properly train the two of them, as well as the youths of Burke Island, and protect them and the safety of Burke Island. He stepped forward and tightly grasped Gobber's other good hand. Burke Island cannot be without a future, and they are that future. I'm counting on you, Gobber, this is more important than going to the dragon's nest. Gobber looked at Stoic's determined gaze, was silent for a moment, and finally nodded. All right, I'll stay. Don't worry, I'll teach them well and guard Burke Island, waiting for your return. Hiccup sat on the edge of the bed in his wooden hut, his feet swinging unconsciously. I really did hit a night fury, he muttered softly to the empty room, his tone filled with unwillingness. His father said he caused trouble, the villagers said he was bragging, only Lin was willing to believe him. But his father didn't believe him, so he had to find that fallen night fury and let everyone know that he was a master dragon slayer. He got up and walked to the window, pushing it open a crack to look towards the back mountain. In the night, the outline of Crow's Ridge was hidden in the deep darkness, and he could vaguely hear the rustling of the wind through the trees. Although he didn't know exactly where the night fury fell, he clearly saw it crash towards Crow's Ridge in the early morning. If he just looked, he would definitely find traces. Knock, 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 he tapped the door 3 times softly, his voice as quiet as a mosquito's buzz. The wooden door quickly opened, and Lin, holding a small torch, was startled to see him. It's so late, why are you here? I'm going to Crow's Ridge in the back mountain to find the night fury. Hiccup leaned closer, his eyes bright as if they held stars. That night fury definitely crashed there in the early morning. If I find it and kill it, I can prove I'm the best dragon slayer. Want to come along? A flash of understanding crossed Lin's eyes. He had already planned to go to the back mountain to investigate the source of the underground power, and Crow's Ridge was exactly the direction where he sensed the energy's attraction. He nodded. Let's go, take the small path west of the village, there are fewer people there. Hiccup immediately smiled and followed Lin step by step towards the back mountain. Just as dawn broke, Hiccup and Lin plunged into the dense forest of Crow's Ridge. Initially, the morning dew soaked their trouser legs, and a thin mist still hung in the woods. Carrying torches, they carefully searched along the direction where the night fury might have fallen, scratches on tree trunks, depressions in the ground, overlooking no anomaly. Yet, they still couldn't find any trace of the night fury. As the sun gradually rose, the thin mist dissipated, and the scorching sunlight filtered through the gaps in the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Hiccup wiped the sweat from his forehead and pulled out the crookedly drawn map from his backpack, poking his finger at the last marked spot. This is it, the west valley of Crow's Ridge marked on the map. If we still can't find it. Before he finished speaking, he had already led Lin into the valley. The valley was overgrown with waist-high weeds, and occasionally a few startled wild rabbits darted past. The two split up, Hiccup pushing aside the weeds, while Lin looked for signs of a large creature having fallen to the ground, such as broken branches or scattered scales. But even as the sun reached its zenith, and the midday heat, carrying the scent of grass and trees, wafted towards them, their hands were still empty when they met again. Hiccup squatted on the ground, spreading out the map, looking at the dense X's on it. The last marked spot was also heavily crossed out with his charcoal pencil. Sigh. Hiccup walked dejectedly, then angrily drew 2 large X's on the map with charcoal, almost filling it. Heaven is unfair to me, Lin, why am I so unlucky that I can't find it? Hiccup sounded deflated. Lin watched Hiccup jab the charcoal pencil hard onto the map, Too large, X's almost covering the crooked outline of the valley, his knuckles white from the effort. He stepped forward, gently patted Hiccup's back, and said in a gentle voice, "Don't worry, how about we split up and search carefully? If we still haven't found it by dark, we'll go home separately." "Okay, let's split up and search. I'll go check ahead." Hiccup regained hope. Hiccup's footsteps gradually faded in the distance as Lin watched his retreating figure. According to the original plot, ahead was where the Night Fury fell, a bond belonging to Hiccup, and he didn't want to interfere too much. Lin clenched his fist, his eyes suddenly firm. "Hiccup has a Night Fury, where can I find my own bond? Perhaps that place that attracts me will have the answer." Ever since he stepped into the back mountain, that strange, warm underground aura had been coiling around him like a thread, growing thicker and thicker, as if an invisible hand was pulling him forward. He followed the sensation deeper into the forest, fallen leaves crunching underfoot. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, weaving a dappled net, and the surrounding birdsong and wind only made his inner sense clearer. But after searching the area with the most concentrated energy, Lin frowned. He found no caves or ruins, not even an unusual rock. "It's clearly around here. Did my perception go wrong?" He leaned against a tree trunk, his fingertips tracing the rough bark, and suddenly a thought struck him. Perhaps I should try a different approach, use the power within me to resonate. Lin sat cross-legged on a flat rock, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. His consciousness sank into his body, the blue energy flowed gently through his meridians like a docile stream. He tried to guide the energy to circulate, and the next second, a faint but clear energy fluctuation seeped into his body through the air, merging with his own power. Found it. Lin's eyes snapped open, a look of pleasant surprise flashing within them. He quickly followed the energy, and soon, a verdant pool came into view. The source of the energy was actually hidden underwater. He quickly took off his coat and placed it on the bank, then leapt into the pool. The expected cold didn't come. Instead, warmth enveloped his entire body, as if he were soaking in a hot spring. Lin kicked his legs, swimming deeper. Sunlight formed a golden pillar through the water, and at a depth of 5 meters, a hidden cave entrance appeared on the pool wall. Passing through the narrow passage, Lin surfaced, instantly awestruck by the sight before him. Inside the spacious cave, pale blue glowing plants covered the rock walls, their soft light illuminating every corner. The further he went, the denser the energy became, and the warmer the air. After turning a corner, colorful crystals hung from the cave ceiling and walls, entwined with glowing plants, like a secret realm from a fairy tale. And in the center of the cave, amidst the largest pile of crystals, a completely black dragon egg lay quietly. It was so black it seemed to swallow light, its surface smooth as black jade, and an ancient, heavy aura slowly emanated from its shell. The strange underground energy continuously surged from a crack beneath the dragon egg. Lin leaned down to look at the crack. Behind the crystal fissures, rolling magma glowed orange-red, making the dragon egg appear even more mysterious. It has absorbed so much energy for so long, its potential must be extraordinary, but why hasn't it hatched? His mind was filled with questions, and he instinctively reached out, wanting to touch the eggshell and feel that ancient aura. Just as his fingertip was about to touch the dragon egg, a nearby crystal grazed his palm. Hiss, a thin cut oozed blood. Lin hastily retracted his hand, but the drop of blood on the crystal slid along its edge, falling precisely onto the black dragon egg. Buzz. The moment the blood drop touched the eggshell, it was absorbed, and the blue energy within Lin's body suddenly became violent, as if forcibly pulled by an invisible force, surging wildly out of his body and into the dragon egg. He felt a sudden weakness, his vision blurred, and he fainted directly onto the ground covered with glowing plants. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, Hiccup walked with his head down when suddenly a branch blocked his way. Fool branch. He muttered under his breath, reaching out to push the branch aside. But the branch was incredibly springy. As soon as it was pushed, it snapped back, hitting him on the forehead with a smack, making him wince in pain and rub his reddened forehead. Hiccup glared indignantly at the branch. Just then, he noticed that the tree from which the obstructing branch came was broken. His gaze swept over to see a long gully plowed into the ground. Following the direction of the scratches, his view was blocked by a small hill ahead. Hiccup followed, reached the top of the slope, and cautiously peeked over. A night fury lay quietly in the clearing. Hiccup gasped in fright, instinctively recoiling, his heart pounding. The Night Fury lay motionless on the ground. Hiccup swallowed, his curiosity overcoming his fear. He slowly straightened up, tiptoeing closer little by little. After confirming the Night Fury showed no movement. Uncontrollable ecstasy burst from his throat. I succeeded. I conquered this giant beast. He walked closer and directly stepped on the Night Fury with one foot. The moment his foot landed, the Night Fury suddenly twitched its body. Ah! Hiccup screamed, stumbling backward and crashing into a rock. He instinctively reached for the dagger at his waist, his trembling hands pulling it out, pointing the blade at the Night Fury. I'm not afraid of you. His voice trembled, but he still feigned composure. I'm a Viking warrior, I can kill you. The Night Fury seemed to see through his cowardice, its struggling movements gradually ceasing, only staring at him with those cold eyes. Seeing the Night Fury stop moving, Hiccup took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the dagger, and stepped forward. But when he saw the Night Fury close its eyes and slowly lower its head, looking as if it had given up resistance, his heart felt as if something had clutched it. I can do it. I'm a dragon slayer. Hiccup squeezed his eyes shut, repeating the phrase continuously, the dagger trembling slightly in his hand. He suddenly raised the dagger, but just as he was about to stab, he stopped. I can't do it. Hiccup dejectedly lowered his dagger. He turned to leave, but his steps grew heavier. All right. I'm really not cut out for dragon slaying. Hiccup turned back to the Night Fury, crouched down, and used his dagger to cut the ropes. The Night Fury opened its eyes in shock and surprise. When the Night Fury felt the restraints on its wings and limbs were gone, it quickly stood up, its massive body stirring up a gust of wind, instantly closing in on Hiccup. Hiccup, terrified, retreated repeatedly, stumbling back against the stone wall as the Night Fury pinned his neck with a claw. The Night Fury did not immediately attack, its cold eyes fixed on Hiccup, as if scrutinizing, or perhaps confirming why this tiny Viking would release its restraints. Hiccup was too scared to speak, a trembling sound escaping his throat. It slowly opened its mouth, letting out a threatening growl, and Hiccup tightly closed his eyes in fear. Suddenly, the Night Fury let out a sharp roar directly at Hiccup. Then it quickly turned and flew away, its two broad wings controlling direction in the air, but it crashed into the mountain wall and fell, disappearing from Hiccup's sight. Hiccup quickly stood up, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the ground. Lin was awakened by a faint, crack, sound. His consciousness broke free from the chaos. First he felt a warm sting in his palm, and then the soft blue light in the cavern filtered through his eyelids, allowing him to slowly open his eyes. How long have I been sleeping? Lin propped himself up from the ground, his body still a bit limp. The blue energy within him seemed to have undergone a fierce drain, leaving only a faint residual warmth. He looked down at his palm, the wound previously scarred by the crystal had already healed. His gaze quickly fell on the pile of crystals at the cavern's center. The black dragon egg remained in place, but it was markedly different. The once smooth shell was now riddled with fine cracks, and the crack sound he'd heard came from those fissures. Lin's heart stirred, he quickly scrambled to his feet and hurried to the crystal pile. He crouched, carefully approaching the dragon egg, fearing to disturb the life within. At that moment, he distinctly felt a faint yet steady vibration emanating from the shell, not the sound of cracks widening, but a heartbeat. Is it about to hatch? Lin's eyes lit up instantly. He held his breath, gently pressing his ear against the shell. A muted, thud-thud, resonated through the hard shell. Though faint, it was brimming with life, each beat subtly resonating with the energy inside him. Just as he was immersed in this delight, the crack sound suddenly grew rapid. The fissures on the dragon egg expanded at a visibly rapid pace. Lin instinctively stepped back half a pace, staring intently at the egg as his heart beat in sync with the shell's vibrations. Bang! A light snap echoed as the top of the dragon egg cracked open a fragment, which fell onto the crystal with a crisp sound. Soon, more shards peeled away, and a small paw covered in black scales emerged from the fissure. The paw was sharp, glinting with a cold sheen. With a gentle kick, it pried the shell open even wider. Lin's breath halted instantly. He watched the little dragon gradually crawl out of the shell, its black scales shimmering metallic under the blue light, distinct from the pitch black of Night Fury. This hatchling's scales appeared heftier, each resembling meticulously forged armor. Its tail was unusually long, almost exceeding the body's total length by a full measure, swaying gently. Its neck was longer than any dragon Lin had ever seen, flexibly turning left and right as if surveying the unfamiliar surroundings. Its limbs were stout and powerful, muscle lines clearly visible beneath the scales, especially the chest muscles, which were more developed than those of ordinary hatchlings, exuding an innate sense of strength. On its head perched a pair of small and a pair of slightly larger black horns, resembling rounded obsidian, and a pair of bright golden vertical pupils stared curiously at the crouching Lin. The most astonishing feature was its wings when spread. They spanned 1.5 times its body length, the scales on the wings arranged neatly, and each flap stirred a breeze, making the ambient energy seem to ripple along. Lin stared at the hatchling, and a familiar figure flashed in his mind, the ultimate forbidden black dragon he had seen in Monster Hunter. The same black scales, elongated neck and tail, proportionate limbs, and those wings that far exceeded its body size. Aside from its smaller stature and underdeveloped horns, it was virtually identical to the legendary forbidden black dragon. Is this a forbidden black dragon? Lin muttered to himself, his mind full of shock and disbelief. He never imagined that in the world of How to Train Your Dragon, a legendary creature from another realm could appear, and that this hatchling was awakened by his own blood. Moreover, in Monster Hunter lore, black dragons are called evil dragons, capable of turning the world into scorched earth within days, serving as agents of disaster and death. But why does this little guy look so oddly cute? The hatchling seemed to understand him, tilting its head slightly. On its red little head, the two pairs of freshly sprouted mini horns wobbled, then emitted a soft, infantile, awoo sound. It wasn't the typical hatchling's cry. The sound carried clear dependence and affection, piercing straight into Lin's mind, translating to the blunt meaning, mama. That, mama, made Lin's whole body stiffen. The shocked expression on his face froze instantly, and then his mouth twitched uncontrollably, once, twice, like a robot whose pause button had been pressed. He stared blankly at the hatchling's great black eyes, full of innocence and attachment, his mind freezing for a full 3 seconds. No. Lin instinctively raised his hand, fingertip pointing at himself, his tone absurdly incredulous, his voice a bit airy. I'm a real man, what are you calling me? The hatchling blinked, then nudged his palm again, emitting an even sweeter, awoo, still unmistakably, mama. Lin's mouth twitched even more fiercely, and invisible black lines even appeared at his temples. Inside, he roared wildly, absurd. Too absurd. The world-destroying black dragon hatchling actually calling me, mama. Who could have imagined such a twist? He opened his mouth, first reflexively quipping, is this a happy dad situation? The words slipped out, but he immediately shook his head, his hurried tone cracking a bit. No, that's wrong. It's a happy mom situation. The surrounding air seemed to quiet, only the hatchling persistently nudging his hand with its little head, emitting affectionate whimpers. Its demeanor was so docile it bore no trace of the ferocity associated with the legendary forbidden black dragon. Lin watched its demeanor, and recalling Monster Hunter's terrifying accounts of black dragons, his mouth's twitch never ceased. His heart was a swirl of emotions. On one hand, helplessness at this absurd turn. On the other, a subtle feeling of being relied upon by the hatchling, plus an indescribable tension. This is a black dragon. A black dragon that calls me, mama. He instinctively touched his chest, feeling the faint yet familiar energy within, the temperature at his fingertips calming him slightly. The wondrous sense of connection brought by that, mama, still lingered, as if he and the hatchling were truly bound together by some force. What the heck? Lin muttered softly, his gaze complex as he stared at the hatchling. If the legendary forbidden black dragon hatchling calls me, mama, who would believe it if I told anyone? His mouth still twitched faintly, but looking at the hatchling's pure golden eyes, the absurdity in his mind was suddenly shattered by a thought. Wait. A black dragon. This is the legendary forbidden black dragon capable of destroying the heavens. In an instant, Lin's eyes shone astonishingly, the twitch in his mouth halted abruptly, replaced by an uncontrollable glee, even a surge of hot-blooded excitement. He stared at the soft little body, his mind calculating, losing face is nothing, being a happy mom, what of it? When this little one grows up, it'll be at the top of the food chain. Then, having a black dragon by his side, wouldn't he be invincible? He began to relish the calculations. In the future, whether it's a dragon raid or an encounter with other unknown monsters, as long as the black dragon moves, it will sweep everything away. Then, not only could he protect Burke Island, but the entire sea would dare not trouble him. The feeling of invincibility was already exhilarating to imagine. Never mind, never mind. Lin's mouth curled a determined smile. The previous helplessness and entanglement vanished, replaced by full anticipation. Being a happy mom is fine, I can't just toss this little one away. He reached out, gently patting the hatchling's head. His fingertips brushed its delicate, warm scales, feeling soft and especially comfortable. The little dragon seemed to enjoy his petting, letting out a satisfied purr, its body curling slightly, nudging his palm with its tiny head, looking ever more obedient. Lin's heart melted completely as he continued to gently stroke the little dragon's head, silently vowing to raise this, future invincible backing, well. He slowly closed his eyes, focused his spirit, and began to carefully investigate the mysterious power within his body. No matter what, he had to find out what this power was and why it made the black dragon hatchling develop such deep dependence on him. After all, this was a matter that could determine whether he could truly become invincible in the future. At this moment, as he focused his senses, he discovered that countless threads seemed hidden within the mist, all extending toward the little dragon. As Lin's perception deepened, he was astonished to find that these threads were actually linked to a power inside the little dragon, like two vines tangled together by an invisible hand, interwoven without distinction. Lin could feel two strands of energy, a red one and a blue one, entwining within him, and the flow of his internal energy had accelerated. Whenever he tried to manipulate the power inside himself, the force within the little dragon resonated in response, and the little dragon seemed to sense this resonance as well. Its golden vertical pupils sparkled with lively light. It let out another cheerful, "Awoo," its tail involuntarily swaying gently, affectionately nudging Lin's hand. Boom! The cave suddenly shook violently, and debris from the ceiling rained down. A crack beneath the dragon egg spewed scorching gusts, dense energy laced with sparks billowing out, and the black dragon emitted an uneasy, "Awoo" hum. Lin immediately scooped up the black dragon into his arms and turned to rush toward the path he had come from. The ground beneath his feet trembled, glowing plants flickered out one after another, crystals shattered as they fell. He sprinted to the pond's edge, and a massive collapse roar echoed behind him. Lin looked back. The original entrance was blocked by boulders. He leapt into the pond with the little dragon, the water churning wildly from the tremor. After reaching shore, Lin collapsed onto the grass, panting heavily. Yet when he saw the black dragon in his arms, he smiled. The little dragon nudged his chin, its golden pupils reflecting the sunset, as if soothing him. Lin patted its head, thinking to himself, glad we escaped. Lin cradled the black dragon, crouching as he slipped into the shrubbery of the back mountain. The setting sun stretched their shadows long, and distant laughter of Burke Island villagers finishing work drifted in. His throat tightened. If those brutish men who view dragons as enemies saw the black dragon, the little creature would surely be brutally slain. He deliberately took a secluded path. When he encountered a patrolling Viking warrior, he quickly ducked into a rock crevice, wrapping the black dragon tightly in his coat. The black dragon seemed half understanding, obediently curling in his arms, even its faint, "Awoo," suppressed to a whisper. After a harrowing trek, he finally reached the woodshed behind his cabin. Lin pushed open the half-closed door, slipped inside, and only then dared to gasp for breath. It's safe. He gently placed the black dragon on the bed. The little creature immediately flicked its long tail curiously, nudging his wrist with its head. Just as Lin exhaled, he sensed a surge of energy from below. The subterranean energy was richer than when he first crossed, perhaps because the dragon egg had blocked it before. Now the black dragon's hatching has fully released the energy. At that moment, surrounding energy converged, surged into the house and was absorbed by the black dragon. Lin stared in amazement as the black dragon's body also displayed a red and a blue strand of energy flowing automatically. This must be the ley line energy from Monster Hunter. Lin crouched, palm pressed to the ground, clearly sensing the energy's underground flow, linked to Burke Island's ley lines. He closed his eyes again, looking inward. The bond's power with the black dragon circulated slowly within him. Having never known its name, a flash of insight struck. Let's call it dragon taming power. The black dragon seemed to sense it too, its golden pupils brightening as it nudged his side, gently rubbing his back of the hand with its scales, as if responding to the wondrous connection. Lin gazed at the black dragon's lively golden eyes, his fingertips lightly brushing its rounded horn, and an idea to name it suddenly rose in his mind. He recalled it resembled the forbidden black dragon from Monster Hunter, whose mightiest counterpart is called Miraluz, a name gradually clarified. From now on, I'll call you Miricious, and just Miricious for short. As soon as he finished speaking, Miricious jerked its head up, its golden pupils instantly turning round and bright like two tiny suns. It joyfully swished its long tail, the tip lightly sweeping the bedboard with a faint rustle, then hopped to Lin's side, repeatedly nudging his palm with its head, emitting a series of soft, awoo sounds, as if gleefully answering the name. Miricious, Mira, 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 the little creature's voice echoed in Lin's mind, soft and milky. Lin chuckled at its antics, gently rubbing its neck. Looks like you really like this name. Miricious seemed to understand, nudging his hand again, its wings lightly resting on his wrist, exuding affectionate dependence. After a short while, Miricious suddenly halted, its belly slightly collapsing. It plaintively nudged Lin's arm, its golden pupils watery, occasionally lowering its head to lick its claws, emitting intermittent whimpering sounds. Lin instantly realized, Mira, are you hungry? He rose and fetched 2 fresh sea bass from a bamboo basket in the corner, fish he had set aside that morning for himself, now perfectly handy. He placed the sea bass in his palm. Miricious's eyes lit up instantly, cautiously approaching, snapping up a fish with sharp yet gentle teeth, tilting its head to swallow. After finishing, it lingered, licking Lin's palm before grabbing the second. The little creature ate slowly but earnestly, its golden pupils brimming with satisfaction. After eating its fill, Miricious's movements gradually slowed, its golden pupils began to narrow slightly, its long tail swaying weakly, clearly drowsy. It let out a tiny yawn, its head rubbing around in Lin's arms, seemingly searching for a comfortable spot. Awoo Tilda, the little Mira whispered gently to Lin. Lin's surprised expression stared at Mira, thinking, Mira was just born not long ago, and already knows how to say goodnight. Indeed, the awoo tilde Mira just made conveyed a good night in his heart. Finally, it curled up, tucking its head into Lin's crook, its limbs gently resting on his legs, warm breath radiating through its scales. Within moments, a steady soft purr filled the air, its wings relaxed at its sides, clearly sleeping soundly. The moment dawn broke, a loud banging on the wooden door made it tremble slightly. Gobber's rough voice, carried by the morning breeze, came through. Lin. Get up, we're going to the dragon prison today to practice dragon slaying skills, don't be late. Lin shot up from his bed. Miricious, startled by the sudden noise, instantly opened her golden vertical pupils, her usually docile demeanor tensing up. She immediately arched her back, her small head turning towards the door, letting out a low growl. The small horns on her head perked up, and even her tail stiffened, looking fierce and ready to say, whoever dares to enter will regret it, completely losing her soft, cuddly charm from last night. Shish, it's one of us, don't get excited. Lin quickly reached out to press Myra's back, his fingertips gently stroking her scales to comfort her. With his other hand, he covered her small mouth, afraid that Gobber outside the door would hear the low growl. Good girl, it's okay, he's just calling me for training. Mira didn't seem to fully lower her guard, her golden vertical pupils still fixed on the door, but under Lin's touch, the low growl in her throat gradually faded, though her tail still swayed slightly, showing a hint of displeasure. Lin finally breathed a sigh of relief and called out to the door. Got it, Gobber. I'll be ready in a minute, you go call the others, I'll be right there. Gobber's gruff reply soon came from outside. Alright, hurry up. The dragon prison can't wait. This was followed by footsteps gradually fading away, indicating he had turned to call the others. Lin lowered his head, his fingertips gently rubbing Miricious's round head, his voice soft and gentle. I'll only be out for a little while, and I'll be back soon. You stay home and be a good girl, don't run around, okay? Mira seemed to understand. The wariness in her golden vertical pupils lessened, and she gently rubbed her head against his palm. Her tail was no longer tense, swaying slightly. Seeing this, Lin got up and walked to the wooden box in the corner, taking out a small packet of dried meat wrapped in oil paper. He placed the dried meat on a small plate by the bed and pushed it in front of Mira. If you get hungry, eat this. I'll bring you fresh fish when I get back. Mira sniffed at it, her golden vertical pupils brightening, but she didn't immediately eat. Instead, she looked up at Lin, as if confirming his words. Lin couldn't help but smile, reaching out to pinch her small paw. Such a good girl, I'll be back. With that, he quickly put on his leather armor, then looked back at Mira, who was obediently lying by the bed, before gently closing the door and hurrying towards the dragon prison on the east side of the village. As Lin walked out of the alley where his wooden house was, he saw Hiccup not far away on the stone path, slowly walking forward with a slightly clumsy axe on his back, his head hung low, his steps betraying his reluctance. Hiccup. Lin quickly walked up and clapped him on the shoulder with a smile. Hiccup suddenly looked up, and seeing it was Lin, he forced a smile, though the frustration in his eyes was undeniable. Lin. You've also been called to learn dragon slaying skills, huh? Lin nodded, his gaze falling on the axe on Hiccup's back. He asked knowingly, didn't you say yesterday you were going to the back mountain to find a night fury? Did you find one? At the mention of this, Hiccup's eyes dimmed, and his steps faltered. His voice also lowered. I found it, but I let it go. Let it go. Lin feigned surprise, raising an eyebrow, and continued, didn't you always want to prove you could slay a dragon? Hiccup gave a bitter laugh, scratched his head, his tone full of self-doubt. I thought if I found a night fury and killed it, everyone would accept me. But when I actually saw it injured and giving up resistance, I couldn't do it. He paused, then added, I guess I'm not cut out to be a dragon-slaying master. I can't even kill an injured dragon, so how can I talk about protecting the village? As he spoke, Hiccup's mood grew even more somber. He kicked a small pebble at his feet. After I got home yesterday, before I even had a chance to tell my father about it, he took matters into his own hands and said I should learn some real skills. This morning, he had Gobber call me over to learn dragon slaying techniques, but He didn't finish his sentence, but let out a heavy sigh, clearly resistant to the arrangement. He patted Hiccup's back and gently comforted him. Actually, letting the night fury go is fine. At least you followed your heart. Hiccup looked up at Lin, a hint of confusion in his eyes, but still nodded. I hope so, but I always feel like I'm completely different from those Vikings who swing weapons and chop dragons. The two walked side by side, and the outline of the dragon prison gradually emerged at the end of the stone path. In the distance, they could already hear Gobber's voice directing others to gather. Upon reaching it, the dragon prison resembled the Colosseums of ancient Rome, towering circular stone walls, pockmarked surfaces, and lingering black marks. Most striking was the roof, where crisscrossing thick iron chains formed a dome, with links thick enough to grasp, densely woven without gaps, clearly designed to prevent dragons from breaking free and flying away. Inside the stone walls, a circle of stands surrounded a central open area. Several Viking teenagers were already there, brandishing weapons and sparring. In the open space below, Gobber stood in the center with his hands on his hips. Seeing Lin and Hiccup, he shouted, all right, everyone's here, let's start training. With that, Gobber picked up an axe and slammed it heavily on the ground, his voice booming loud enough for the entire dragon prison to hear. First, let me tell you about the dragons you'll all have to deal with. Astrid, Snotlout, Fishlegs, and the twins gathered around. Hiccup quietly shuffled backward, his eyes involuntarily glancing at the iron cages, while Lin stood still, his gaze following Gobber's gestures. First, look at the first cage on the left. Gobber pointed to the easternmost iron cage, where two dragon heads were rubbing against each other. That's a deadly natter. Its two heads have different functions, one breathes fire, the other spits poison. Don't be fooled by its feints. Gobber then pointed to an adjacent cage. Deadly natter, as fast as an arrow, its claws can tear through leather armor, and it can spit dragon breath that melts iron axes. The third is the Inferno Dragon, Gobber's voice deepened. Its fire can burn through shields. Last time it was imprisoned, it almost burned through the cage. The Inferno Dragon seemed to hear him, letting out a rumbling sound from its throat. Next, he pointed to the fourth cage. Then there's the Terrible Terror, highly venomous. Finally, Gobber stopped in front of the westernmost iron cage. This is a gronkle. It looks fat, but it's strong enough to smash rocks, and it can spray lava bombs from its mouth. Today, we'll start practicing with it. As soon as Gobber finished speaking, without giving anyone time to react, he turned and grabbed the thick wooden lever next to the iron cage. Wait! Snotlout suddenly stepped forward, his voice loud and urgent, full of surprise. Gobber, aren't you going to teach us some skills first? You're just letting it out directly. I believe in practical combat. Gobber exerted force with both arms and lifted it upward. Thud! The heavy prison door burst open, and a wave of hot, sulfurous air instantly rushed out, making everyone's skin tighten. The gronkle scurried out, shaking its round body, its small eyes wide. A gurgling growl rumbled in its throat, and its wings flapped rapidly as it circled the open space twice, as if sizing up its prey. Everyone immediately scattered and dodged. Astrid gripped her axe, frowning at the dragon. Hiccup hugged his weapon and shrank back, his eyes full of panic. Lin, however, stood still, his fingertips unconsciously clenching, his gaze fixed on the gronkle's movements, not even missing the frequency of its wing beats. Today's lesson is survival. If you get hit by its lava bomb, you're out. Gobber shouted from the side, hands on his hips. As soon as he finished speaking, the gronkle landed with a thud, waddled to the corner, picked up a few dark brown rocks, and a crunching sound immediately came from its throat. Quickly. What do you need most right now? Gobber's voice suddenly rose. A doctor. Hiccup stammered, clutching his axe. Lin, almost simultaneously with Astrid, but half a beat faster, said, shields. Right. Go get them. Gobber waved his hand, and everyone immediately rushed to the wall, grabbing the wooden shields piled there. The edges of the shields still bore charred marks from previous lava burns. In a moment, the gronkle swayed its round body, gurgling in its throat, then suddenly raised its head, and orange-red lava bombs shot out like fireballs. Fishlegs was the first to suffer. His hands were already trembling nervously. Seeing the lava bomb flying towards him, he frantically raised his shield to block it. With a loud bang, the shield was shattered, and sparks splattered all over his face. He staggered back a few steps, his face pale, his voice trembling. Too powerful. I don't want to try that again. With that, he retreated to the safe zone, holding his broken shield. Next, the lava bomb turned towards Snotlout. Relying on his strength, he charged forward, shield raised, but he didn't expect the lava bomb's impact to be far greater than imagined. The shield instantly cracked, and the impact numbed his arm. He recoiled his neck and said, "This rotten dragon is stronger than me." He reluctantly shook his arm and also retreated to the safe zone. The most chaotic were the twins, Roughnut and Toughnut. When the gronkle attacked, both of them simultaneously lunged for the only shield, pushing and shoving each other to grab it. Give it to me. I got it first. You give it to me. I like this pattern. In their squabble, the shield was pulled askew by the two, and the lava bomb struck the shield and exploded. They froze for a moment, then began to blame each other, eventually retreating together in dismay. In just a few minutes, everyone was defeated one after another, and soon only Lin and Hiccup remained in the center of the open space, directly facing the gronkle's threat. Suddenly, the gronkle sharply turned its head, and a lava bomb shot directly at Hiccup. Hiccup frantically raised his shield to block it. With a crisp crack, the shield instantly shattered from the lava, and fragments splattered all over him. Hiccup turned and ran for his life. The gronkle was already chasing him, its heavy breath hot on his face, cornering him against the stone wall of the dragon prison. The fire in its throat grew brighter and brighter, on the verge of spitting out a deadly lava bomb. At this critical moment, the dragon taming power within Lin suddenly circulated. A warm energy surged through his blood vessels to his legs, instantly giving him explosive speed. Lin gripped his shield tightly with both hands, using the momentum to slam into the gronkle's side. Bang! A dull thud echoed. The gronkle hadn't expected this human to suddenly attack. Its round body was knocked sideways and rolled twice. The lava bomb it spat out brushed past Hiccup, ultimately just letting out a grunt of displeasure. Before the gronkle could get back up, Gobber had already rushed over. Taking advantage of the dragon's momentary daze, he hooked the iron hook into the gronkle's mouth. Gobber yanked backward, using both arms to drag the struggling gronkle towards the cage. Behave. Though the Gronkle was strong, it couldn't resist Gobber. It was pulled back step by the iron chain, its low growl gradually weakening. Not until he had dragged the dragon back to the cage entrance did Gobber suddenly let go, then pushed the prison door back, locking it with a thud, the Gronkle gurgling incessantly in its mouth. Gobber clapped the dust from his hands, then turned to look at the still panting crowd. His gaze swept over Hiccup's dust-covered clothes and then settled on Lin, his voice as heavy as the dragon prison's stone slabs. Hiccup, you almost got hit by a lava bomb just now, but don't worry, this is only the first time, you'll have plenty more chances to practice. He paused, walked to the center of the open space, and surveyed everyone, his tone suddenly becoming serious. But you must remember, as long as you show a weakness, the dragon will eventually. Gobber raised his hand and made a chopping motion, his eyes sharp as knives, kill its opponent. His words instantly silenced the crowd, who had just begun to relax. Hiccup, meanwhile, lowered his head in thought. Lin turned to look at the cage where the Gronkle was imprisoned, his brow slightly furrowed. The moment he collided with the Gronkle, the dragon taming power within him had subtly stirred. If I didn't feel wrong just now, the Gronkle also harbors faint ley line energy, he murmured to himself, his gaze fixed on the dragon prison where the Gronkle was held. It's just that this energy is too sparse, without close contact, it would be impossible to sense. He suddenly remembered Miricius waiting for him at home. The training ended with Gobber's stern admonishments. Everyone left the dragon prison one after another. Hiccup walked at the very front, still lowering his head, seemingly lost in thought. Lin followed behind, his fingertips still tingling with the soreness from holding the shield earlier. More than half of the dragon taming power in his body had been consumed. Stepping out of the dragon prison's stone archway, the wind of Burke Island blew against his face. It wasn't the hot, sulfur-mixed air current of the dragon prison, but a sea breeze carrying the salty moisture of the ocean, mixed with the sound of small waves crashing on the shore, instantly dissipating the fatigue from training. Lin stopped, looking in the direction the sea breeze was coming from. He could see the distant blue-green sea surface shimmering. Several small Viking fishing boats were drifting slowly on the water, their nets hanging down, seemingly waiting for a catch. He suddenly remembered the promise he had made to Mira before leaving home, I'll bring you back fresh fish. The anxiety he felt earlier in the dragon prison was instantly suppressed somewhat by this thought. Lin subconsciously curled his lips, turned around, and changed his route toward the shore. Since there was still some time until lunch, he might as well go catch a few fresh sea fish. Mira had only eaten dried meat this morning, and she would definitely prefer the taste of fresh fish. He walked quickly along the flagstone path. When passing a villager's wooden house, he didn't forget to greet the old woman weaving fishing nets at the door and conveniently borrowed the small fishing net she had placed beside the entrance. The sea wind grew stronger, making the hem of his clothes flap loudly. Distant waves crashed against the reefs, creating a crash sound. Before long, he was heading home, carrying several plump sea fish strung together with hemp rope. Their gills were still slightly moving, indicating they were extremely fresh. Mira, I'm home. As soon as Lin pushed open the wooden door, a black shadow shot, swoosh, off the bed and pounced straight at him. By the time he reacted, his shoulder was already heavy. Mira was affectionately rubbing her small head against his neck, her golden vertical pupils sparkling, and soft, woo-woo, sounds coming from her throat, full of the dependence of someone who had waited a long time. Ha ha ha, that tickles. Lin couldn't help but laugh out loud from the rubbing. He reached out to pick the little guy up, his fingertips just touching its wing. Mira suddenly sniffed, turning her nose toward the fish in his hand. Her golden vertical pupils instantly widened into perfect circles, and her tail began wagging happily behind his back. The next second, her little belly let out a gurgle, a sound so loud that Lin couldn't help but laugh. He casually took out a fish and handed it over. Mira immediately bit and held it down, gliding with outstretched wings as she jumped to the ground, where she grabbed the fish with both claws and began eating it bite by bite. Lin squatted down and stroked her back, suddenly pausing. Mira, under his fingertips, seemed to be a full size larger than yesterday. She used to fit perfectly in his arms, but now, with her wings spread, she was probably an arm's length across. You grow so fast, he couldn't help but sigh, getting up to light the oil lamp. His gaze swept across the room, and he instantly froze. The wooden box in the room was overturned on the floor, the dried meat wrapped in oil paper was scattered everywhere, and even the quilt had been dragged onto the ground, looking exactly like the aftermath of a petty thief. Lin held his forehead, instantly getting a headache. I was planning to grill you some delicious fish later, but now that you've messed up the house like this, no grilled fish for you. Mira paused her fish chewing, lifted her small head, her golden vertical pupils looking watery. She slowly retracted her neck and secretly hid behind the foot of the bed, only revealing half her head to look at Lin, wearing a wronged expression that seemed to say, I know I messed up. Seeing her like this, how could Lin stay angry? He could only sigh helplessly. He first went to the courtyard to start a bonfire, placed the remaining 3 fish on the iron rack, and then turned back inside to clean up the mess. Only after hearing the sounds of things being tidied up inside the house did Mira cautiously inch out and continue chewing on the rest of the fish. By the time Lin had cleaned the house and walked out into the courtyard wiping his hands, he found that Mira had finished the first fish. She was standing on her short little legs, stretching her neck toward the grilled fish over the bonfire, her mouth nearly touching the fish skin. Mira, no. Lin quickly stepped forward. Caught in the act, Mira snapped her head back, her golden vertical pupils wide and round. Her tail gently hooked his trouser leg, attempting to charm her way out of trouble. Lin deliberately deepened his tone, bent down, picked her up, and placed her on his lap. He reached out and flipped the fish on the iron rack. The fish skin was already golden brown and sizzling with oil, instantly intensifying the aroma. At this moment, Mira looked up, staring pitifully at Lin again, while making ying 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 sounds from her mouth. Lin said helplessly, I really can't win with you, Mira. Don't rush, it'll be ready soon. Seeing that the fish was almost cooked, Lin pulled a small bag of salt from his pocket and sprinkled a bit onto the fish. The salt grains fell onto the hot oil with a sizzle. A richer aroma drilled straight into Mira's nose. The little guy had dragon drool seeping from the corners of her mouth as she stared longingly at the grilled fish. All right, here you go. Look how impatient you are. Lin picked up a string of grilled fish, blew on it to cool it slightly, and then offered it to Mira. Mira couldn't hold back anymore. She took a big bite. The tender fish meat melted in her mouth, and even the bones crunched audibly, her throat filled with satisfied, gurgle gurgle, sounds. Lin picked up another fish, blew on it, and took a bite. The fish meat carried the freshness of the sea. Although it lacked the complexity of modern seasonings, it possessed the most primal deliciousness. Although it can't compare to modern flavors, the freshness of this fish is truly rich. After finishing the grilled fish, Mira yawned widely, rubbed Lin's palm, and slowly crawled back onto the bed. Before long, she was emitting soft, even snores, her wings lightly covering her body like a small blanket. Lin looked at her sleeping form, smiled, and shook his head. He turned to clean up the area around the bonfire, his heart filled with a reassuring warmth. After Lin finished tidying up the items near the bonfire, his gaze fell upon the sleeping Mira on the bed. Somehow, he suddenly sensed streams of pure ley line energy slowly rising from underground, seeping into Mira's body along with her breath, seemingly being absorbed unconsciously while she slept. So that's it. Lin suddenly understood. Mira growing a size larger overnight was precisely because she had absorbed a large amount of ley line energy. A shock suddenly ran through his heart. Mira, as a black dragon, could absorb ley line energy, but what about other dragons? Did they also possess this ability? What made him even more uneasy was the Red Death in the dragon's nest, that dragon king who commanded all dragons. If it could also absorb ley line energy, its power would likely far exceed the settings in the original work. Based on the timing, the Red Death should be sleeping after eating its fill. Once it gets hungry, it will send the dragon flock to Burke Island to find food, and most importantly, it will recall the Night Fury to the dragon's nest. Lin recalled the training earlier that day. Even using the dragon taming power for a full-strength strike, he only managed to repel one Gronkle. If he were to face the Red Death, relying only on his current strength, he probably wouldn't even be qualified to get close. Hiccup was originally able to defeat the Red Death through his bond with the Night Fury, but with the existence of ley line energy now, would it make the Red Death stronger? Could Hiccup still succeed like in the original story? A strong desire to become stronger surged into his heart, making his breathing quicken slightly. I must quickly improve myself. I can't hold Mira back. He watched Mira absorbing the ley line energy. Lin began sensing the energy within his body, guiding it to accelerate the absorption of ley line energy. The orb of light in his sea of consciousness was slowly growing larger. Hiccup, filled with confusion, unconsciously found himself back in the forest where the Night Fury had crashed yesterday. The trampled weeds still bore marks, and the cracks on the rock where the Night Fury had hit were still clear. He crouched down, his fingertips gently tracing the surface of the rock, muttering to himself, "You had so many chances to kill me, so why didn't you?" His words echoed through the forest, only to be answered by the rustling of leaves in the wind. Hiccup stood up and walked aimlessly. After an unknown amount of time, a sinkhole suddenly appeared before him. The walls of the pit were covered in moss, and the faint sound of flowing water could be heard from the bottom. As he leaned in to look down, his gaze was suddenly drawn to something glinting faintly by the edge of the pit. It was a black scale with a metallic luster, with traces of mud still clinging to its edges. It was a Night Fury scale. This is. Hiccup excitedly picked up the scale. Before he could examine it closely, a black shadow suddenly darted past his eyes and flew straight up towards the top of the sinkhole. He froze in fright, instinctively stumbled backward, and sat heavily on the ground, almost dropping the scale in his hand. Looking up, it was the Night Fury. It flapped its wings, trying with all its might to fly out of the sinkhole, but just as it reached halfway to the opening, it lost its balance and fell back to the bottom with a thud. The Night Fury let out an unwilling roar, struggled to get up, and tried to take off again in a different direction. But its unhealed wings couldn't support its body at all. After only a few feet in the air, it plummeted straight back to the bottom of the sinkhole, kicking up a cloud of dust. Hiccup sat on the ground, his heart still pounding, but he also took the opportunity to get a clear look at the Night Fury. He suddenly remembered the parchment and charcoal pencil in his pocket and quickly fumbled them out. Using the faint light filtering through the trees, he quickly began to sketch. Its sleek black body, bat-like wings, and distinctive tail fin, with 3 pairs of wings, 1 large and 2 small, were all precisely captured by his strokes. As the Night Fury gradually took shape on the paper, Hiccup stared at his drawing, then looked down at the figure at the bottom of the sinkhole, and his gaze suddenly paused. One side of the Night Fury's tail fin was missing, and the broken area still showed unhealed marks. "So that's why you can't fly away." Hiccup clutched the parchment, his heart filled with sudden understanding and complex emotions. At this moment, the Night Fury at the bottom of the pit seemed to have recovered some strength. It shook its head, spread its wings again, and flapped vigorously, rushing towards the opening of the pit. But its injured tail fin couldn't balance its body at all. After flying halfway, it fell again with a thud, like a kite with a broken string, crashing heavily by the pool at the bottom of the sinkhole. The fish in the water were startled by the sudden commotion and scattered, several even leaping out of the water, their silvery figures flashing in the sunlight. The Night Fury's already low spirits were instantly captivated by the fish, and its earlier frustration seemed to vanish. It quietly moved closer to the edge of the pool, crouching on the ground, its golden vertical pupils fixed on the swimming fish in the water, even its breathing softened. As soon as the moment arrived, it suddenly lunged its head to bite the water, but the fish reacted extremely quickly, darting away with a whoosh, and disappearing into the depths of the pool. Unable to catch a fish, the Night Fury droopily wagged its tail, found a dry spot, and curled up, burying its head under its wings, looking utterly dispirited. Just then, the charcoal pencil in Hiccup's hand suddenly slipped, falling onto the rock wall of the sinkhole with a clatter, sliding down the moss, and finally landing on a stone at the bottom of the pit. The sound was exceptionally clear in the quiet sinkhole. The Night Fury instantly raised its head, its green eyes precisely locking onto Hiccup at the pit's opening. Its previously drooping ears also perked up. Hiccup froze, not daring to breathe, only able to meet its gaze head-on, his palms sweating from nervousness. As their eyes met, the Night Fury tilted its head. There was no fierce look in its black pupils as expected, instead, there was a hint of imperceptible confusion, as it stared motionless at the young man at the pit's opening, as if curious why he was there. Night quietly enveloped Burke Island. The bonfire outside the wooden house gradually extinguished, leaving only scattered starlight filtering through the window cracks. Mira on the bed suddenly stirred, her golden vertical pupils glowing in the darkness. Her little belly rumbled twice. She groggily climbed up, moved next to Lin, gently nudged his arm with her small head, let out soft, woo-woo, sounds from her throat, and licked his dragon muzzle with her small tongue. Lin suddenly came to his senses, the dragon-taming power flowing within him slowly receding. He opened his eyes and saw Myra's pitiful appearance in the starlight, and couldn't help but smile. You must be starving, right? He rubbed Myra's head, got up to light the oil lamp, and his gaze swept across the dark night sky outside the window. He suddenly remembered that in the original story, the Great Hall would distribute food to the villagers every night. Everyone was probably gathered there now, drinking and chatting lively. Hiccup and the others would most likely go to the Great Hall after training. Lin's heart stirred. He could go ask Hiccup if there was any new progress in finding the Night Fury during the day. Also, the Great Hall had a variety of food, and bringing some back for Myra's dinner would be good. Wait for me, Mira. Lin stroked her wing. I'm going to the village Great Hall to get some food. I'll be back soon. Mira nodded her head, curled back onto the bed, staring eagerly at the door, her tail tip gently wagging, clearly hoping he would return quickly. Lin casually picked up his jacket, put it on, gently closed the door, and walked towards the Great Hall on Burke Island. As night deepened, occasional insect chirps could be heard on the cobblestone path, and the distant sounds of conversation from the Great Hall faintly drifted over, breaking the night's silence. Lin had just walked past two small alleys when he saw a familiar figure on the cobblestone path ahead. Hiccup was walking slowly with his head down, still clutching the parchment with the Night Fury drawing, his steps more sluggish than usual. Hiccup. Lin quickly walked up and patted his shoulder. Did you go look for the Night Fury yesterday? I felt like you were distracted during training today. What happened? Hiccup suddenly looked up and, seeing it was Lin, his tense shoulders relaxed a bit. He tightened his grip on the parchment and lowered his voice. I found it, but it had a chance to kill me, and it didn't. He didn't say much, but the confusion and bewilderment in his eyes had already revealed most of his thoughts. Lin understood and didn't press for details, merely patting his back. Let's go eat something first. We can talk about it slowly. The two walked side by side towards the Great Hall. As they reached the entrance, they heard Gobber's booming voice from inside. What mistake did Astrid make in the dragon training arena today? Astrid stood in front of the crowd, frowning, her tone a little defiant. I miscalculated the timing of my front flip, which was super lame, and it prevented me from doing the backflip. That's right. I noticed it too. Ruffnut immediately chimed in, deliberately puffing out her chest. Snotlout, however, yelled from the side. No, you were awesome. That wasn't a mistake at all, it's your style. Astrid rolled her eyes dramatically, ignoring him. Gobber, however, said gravely, Astrid is right. You must be strict with yourselves. Even a small mistake can cost you your life. As he spoke, he saw Hiccup arrive and swept his gaze over everyone. What mistake did Hiccup make? Ruffnut quickly spoke up. He showed up for class. Toughnut followed up with a jab, and didn't get eaten by a dragon. He's never where he's supposed to be. Astrid's voice was calm and direct. Gobber nodded. Thank you, Astrid. You must memorize these mistakes thoroughly. If you make them again next time, it won't be so easy. Lin and Hiccup took the opportunity to walk in, bypass the food counter, and pick up 2 portions of roast meat and oatcakes. Just as Lin was about to find a corner to sit down, he heard Ruffnut suddenly raise her voice. Wow, Lin. Ruffnut rushed over, her eyes shining, staring at Lin with excitement. That move where you knocked the Gronkle flying in the dragon training arena earlier was so cool. I want to be protected by a great Viking warrior too. Lin was stunned for a moment, then smiled and shook his head, his tone serious. I don't just protect one person, I protect all of Burke Island. Hiccup couldn't help but laugh beside him, pulling Lin's sleeve. Don't mind her, let's go sit over there. The two carried their food to the next table and sat down. Lin looked at Hiccup's untouched roast meat and said softly, but seriously, Hiccup is my brother. No matter what happens in the future, I will take care of him. Hiccup looked up at Lin, the confusion in his eyes fading a bit, and a small smile finally appeared on his lips. He picked up the roast meat and took a bite. As he was eating the roast meat, Gobber took out a thick leather-bound book from his cloth bag and said gravely, This is the Book of Dragons. Every type of dragon we know is recorded in it. Hiccup's gaze was instantly captivated by the book, and he forgot to bite his roast meat, a night fury. Would there be a record of the night fury in the book? Why didn't it kill him? How could its injured tail fin recover? Gobber placed the Book of Dragons on the stone table and pointed to a page. You guys read this carefully, especially the part about the Gronkle. There'll be a test on it tomorrow during training. With that, he clapped the dust from his hands and turned to leave the great hall, leaving a group of teenagers looking at each other. Read a book. No way, I'm going out to wreak havoc. Snotlout was the first to jump up, dropping his oatcake and heading out, afraid that if he was a moment too slow, he'd be stuck with the book. Roughnut and Toughnut also joined in the commotion, one saying, I need to sharpen my axe, and the other shouting, I have to check the traps. The two hadn't discussed it beforehand, and their excuses were transparently perfunctory, disappearing in a flash. Fishlegs hesitated for a moment, then quietly said, I need to organize my dragon notes, and slowly shuffled away. The great hall instantly fell silent, leaving only Hiccup, Lynn, and Astrid. Hiccup stared at the Book of Dragons, then looked at Astrid, tentatively asking, do you want to look at it together? Maybe we can find something useful. Astrid tidied her belongings without lifting her head. I've already read it. I remember the Gronkle's weaknesses very clearly. With that, she also turned and left, leaving Hiccup standing there somewhat awkwardly. Never mind, let's the two of us look. Lynn walked over, pulled up a chair, and sat down, casually flipping open the Book of Dragons. His gaze quickly scanned the pages, but his mind was on something else. He generally understood the dragons of Burke Island, but could this Book of Dragons hide other secrets? For instance, those fierce monsters from the Monster Hunter world. If he could find relevant records, he might be able to prepare for them in advance. Hiccup also leaned over, his finger lightly tapping the page, his gaze eagerly searching for traces of the Night Fury. Do you think there'll really be a Night Fury in here? Lynn looked up, meeting his expectant eyes, and said softly, we'll search page by page. There will be an answer eventually. Under the lamplight, their figures huddled over the Book of Dragons. One sought the secret of the Night Fury, the other explored unknown monsters. Each had their own agenda, yet they tacitly flipped through the ancient book together. The Book of Dragons began by classifying dragons by genus. The writing, worn by years, still conveyed a sense of gravity: Stoker class, Title class, Mystery class, Strike class. Each page recorded only one type of dragon, accompanied by crude yet ferocious sketches. The monstrous nightmare of the Stoker class was depicted breathing fire at a village. The hotpurple of the Title class, illustrated lurking in the waves with its sharp teeth exposed, had a final red-inked comment: extremely dangerous, kill on sight. From the Deadly Natter to the Deadly Natter, the end of every page was identical, filled with hatred of blood and fire. The faster Hiccup flipped, the heavier his heart became. Finally, he reached the last page, where the words, Night Fury, stood alone at the top. The page was empty, with no illustration, only a few lines of messy script. Mystery class, speed faster than lightning, breath is blue plasma, hard to find in the dark, child of death and lightning. Hiccup clutched the parchment in his arms. He looked down at the Night Fury he had drawn on the paper, wings spread, its tailfin missing a piece. He carefully spread the drawing on the blank space, gently pressing it flat. This is right. His voice was very soft. Lynn looked at him like this, just about to speak, when his eyes caught sight of several pages glued tightly together behind the Night Fury page. Lynn looked at his focused expression, about to speak, when he noticed several pages glued together behind the Night Fury page. He carefully separated the pages. On the yellowed paper, the writing was somewhat blurred, stating, legend has it that beyond the borders of Burke Island, there are unknown seas and lands, where monsters more terrifying than evil dragons reside. Odin's wrath, monsters appeared. Lynn stared at the blurred lines, his pupils suddenly contracting, his fingertips clenching unconsciously. Odin's wrath, monsters appeared. These few words struck him like a heavy hammer. He suddenly remembered the forbidden existence at home, and then thought of the terrifying beings in the Monster Hunter world that could destroy towns and even shake the foundations of the world. If the monsters beyond the border were from the Monster Hunter world, Burke Island's defenses would be completely vulnerable. Looking around the hall at the chatting Vikings, he couldn't help but think, If we really encounter them, how long can these cold weapons and Viking brute force last? If Burke Island continues to rely solely on the Vikings' brute force and doesn't change the status quo, it probably won't survive in the future, Lin thought to himself, a notion becoming increasingly clear. It seems we need to get Burke Island dragon riders quickly. The bond between the Night Fury and Hiccup, and Myra's reliance on him, all told him, dragons aren't just enemies. If the Vikings and dragons could fight side by side, forming dragon rider teams, they would truly have the power to confront unknown monsters. A strong sense of urgency surged in his heart. He had to improve his strength quickly, not just his dragon-taming power, but also make Mira stronger, to have the capital to protect Burke Island before unknown dangers arrived. Hiccup also watched with a pounding heart, his lips pressed into a thin line. The image of the Night Fury in the cove kept flashing in his mind, and then thinking of those potentially terrifying monsters, he felt his throat tighten. Are these real? His voice trembled, carrying the fear of a young man facing the unknown. Lin carefully tucked the tattered pages back into the Book of Dragons and closed the book. Whether it's real or not, we can't be careless. It's getting late, I need to go back. Lin picked up the food bag he had set aside, which still contained roasted meat and oatcakes specially saved for Mira, and hurried towards the door. Hiccup also stood up and followed Lin out of the Great Hall. I should go back too. They parted ways at the hall entrance, each heading towards their homes. Lin returned to the wooden house. As soon as he pushed open the door, he saw Mira curled up by the bed. Hearing the movement, it immediately lifted its head, its golden vertical pupils gleaming in the dim light, and let out a soft, whining sound. He quickly walked over, placed the food in front of Mira, and stroked its head, his tone urgent and serious. Mira, we might be facing something very scary. There are unknown monsters beyond the border. Do you have a way to become stronger? Mira gulped down the roasted meat and oatcakes. Hearing this, it looked up, first tilting its head in confusion, then at Lin. It gave two, ooh, calls and rubbed its small head against his palm. Lin listened intently and instantly understood its meaning. Eat, sleep, absorb. These simple 3 words enlightened him. Myra's growth was inseparable from sufficient nutrition and energy absorption. His eyes became firm, and he secretly planned, he needed to find more energy-rich food for Mira, and perhaps find a way to help it absorb more ley line energy, to help it grow quickly. After settling Mira, Lin walked to the window, gazing at the twinkling stars in the night sky, his thoughts drifting to the unknown world beyond the border, the desire to become stronger growing even more intense. On the other side, Hiccup returned to his small wooden house. As soon as he lay down, his mind was filled with the image of the Night Fury. He remembered earlier in the day, at the bottom of the cove, how the Night Fury had poised to strike at the fish in the pool, only to miss. His heart softened at the sight of it curling up dejectedly. It must be starving, right? He murmured to himself, a thought gradually becoming clear. After training tomorrow, he would secretly take a fresh fish to the cove and try to feed it to the Night Fury. Maybe he could get closer to it and resolve the doubts in his heart. Late at night, Burke Island fell into slumber. Lin stood by the window, Hiccup lay on his small bed. Though in their respective rooms, they both looked up at the night sky in unison. Early the next morning, the horns of Burke Island pierced through the morning mist, and all the teenagers gathered in the dragon training arena. Today's training target was a deadly natter. This dragon's 2 heads had separate functions. One head was responsible for spewing gas, and the other rubbed its teeth to ignite the gas. When an enemy approached, it would spew gas smoke, which could conceal its figure, and the gas smoke was also poisonous, making it difficult even for the experienced Astrid to get close. Gobber stood on the high platform, waving his battle axe and shouting, remember. The deadly natter's 2 heads cooperate with each other. You must distract it and use a bucket of water to drench the head that ignites the gas. That way, the deadly natter's most powerful skill will be nullified. As soon as he finished speaking, Gobber released the deadly natter from the dragon prison. As the gate opened, green gas smoke slowly spread out. The deadly natter's 2 heads emerged from the gas smoke, their gaze sweeping over everyone and fixing on Snotlout, who was closest to it. Snotlout was so scared he retreated repeatedly. Seeing this, one of the deadly natter's heads immediately rubbed its sharp teeth, igniting the gas smoke. Snotlout was directly blasted by the gas to the edge of the dragon training arena. Quick, get the buckets. The most important thing is to distinguish which head is the one that ignites. Gabber, who had retreated to the side, immediately shouted. Everyone went to the open space in the middle of the dragon training arena, each picking up a bucket full of water. Just as the deadly natter was in a brief state of rigidity due to the explosion, Lin, empowered by dragon taming power in his legs, rushed forward and splashed water at the head that had just ignited. The deadly natter quickly woke up during the crisis, retreated while spewing smoke, and its body withdrew into the gas smoke. Lin lost his target, and the water he splashed landed on the ground. The deadly natter took the opportunity to charge at Lin while spewing gas. Lin reacted extremely quickly, rolling to dodge, and at the same time signaled to everyone, "Be careful, the deadly natter might ignite the gas again. Go attract the attention of the right head, the igniting one." Astrid and Fishlegs immediately understood, raised their shields, and rushed to the side of the deadly natter, deliberately making piercing clanging sounds with their shields. As expected, the right head was attracted and lunged to bite Astrid. The left head lunged to bite Fishlegs, who couldn't dodge in time and was bitten and flung away. Hiccup, seizing the moment, gripped his water bucket, took a deep breath, and charged forward. He had intended to use Astrid's distraction to accurately splash the right, igniting head, but his arm strength ultimately couldn't keep up with his thoughts. As he raised the bucket midair, he stumbled, his wrist unsteady, and the entire bucket of water splashed out with a whoosh, both off target and rushed. Not a single drop of water touched the dragon's head, instead, it all poured onto his own head. Cold water streamed down his bangs, blurring his vision. His collar was instantly soaked and clung to his back, and the remaining water hit the ground with a splat, splashing his pant legs. Hiccup froze in place, water dripping from his hair, droplets falling from his chin, looking both disheveled and helpless. He instinctively wiped his face, the empty bucket in his hand still swaying slightly, clearly not having anticipated that he could even mess up something as simple as splashing water, due to insufficient strength. Ha 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 ha. Hiccup, are you trying to take a bath? The twins, Roughnut and Toughnut, immediately bent over laughing, pointing at him and mocking him shamelessly. Hiccup's face turned beet red. He clenched the empty bucket in his hand, wishing he could find a hole to crawl into. You still need to see me. Roughnut and Toughnut ran up with their buckets, aiming to splash the deadly natter's heads. 2 buckets of water were directly poured onto the left, gas-spewing head. Roughnut and Toughnut exchanged glances. Oh no. They had caused trouble. The deadly natter became agitated from being splashed. Roughnut and Toughnut took the opportunity to escape. The left head suddenly opened its mouth and bit at Roughnut, while the right head viciously bit at Toughnut. Boom! The gas ignited. Fortunately, the two ran fast enough not to be affected. The enraged deadly natter pursued them closely, its sharp teeth almost grazing the twins' backs. Hold on. Seeing this, Lin immediately abandoned the water bucket, grabbed a stone hammer used to reinforce the fence nearby, and infused his feet with dragon taming power again, rushing over like a blur. He calculated the deadly natter's pursuit trajectory, first leaping up and smashing the right, still roaring head with a hammer. With a dull thud, the stone hammer landed squarely on the dragon's head. Then, leveraging the force, he spun around, forcefully swung his wrist, and the stone hammer slammed into the left, gas-spewing head. The 2 hammer strikes were swift and accurate. The deadly natter was stunned, both heads shaking, its movements noticeably sluggish for a few moments, temporarily halting its pursuit. But it still, by instinct, suddenly spewed a large cloud of gas smoke, its body quickly disappearing into it, vanishing once again. The smell of gas in the dragon training arena grew stronger. Everyone held their breath, closely watching the movement in the smoke. Not long after, 2 dragon heads slowly emerged from the smoke. It was the recovered deadly natter. Now, Astrid's eyes narrowed. Seizing this fleeting opportunity, she rushed forward with her bucket, aimed at the right, igniting head, and fiercely splashed the water out. This time, her aim was excellent. All the water in the bucket poured onto the right dragon head, droplets rolling down its scales, clearly a success. But at this moment, an accident occurred. A surge of energy rapidly flowed within the deadly natter. The left, gas-spewing head suddenly began to rub its teeth fiercely, actually sparking flames. Not good. Retreat quickly. Lin, detecting the abnormal energy fluctuation, reacted with a sudden change in expression, turning to run towards the safe area behind him, while also shouting for Astrid to run. But it was too late. The left head ignited the gas permeating the air, and a massive explosion instantly roared through the dragon training arena. Boom. A scorching wave of air hit them, and the powerful impact directly sent Lin and Astrid, who were running ahead, flying. Like kites with broken strings, they crashed heavily at the edge of the dragon training arena, too much in pain to get up for a long time. Amidst the swirling smoke, the deadly Natter's roar came again, its murky eyes filled with rage, as it advanced step by step towards the two fallen figures, its two heads constantly shaking, seemingly brewing the next round of attack. Just then, Lin propped himself up and slowly rose, fully mobilizing his dragon-taming power. His eyes were sharp, fixed intently on the approaching deadly Natter. He bent down and picked up the stone hammer that had fallen nearby, gripping the handle tightly, his knuckles white from the effort, and walked steadily towards the deadly Natter. Lin, don't be reckless. Gabber on the high platform shouted urgently, but Lin seemed not to hear, continuing to advance step by step. Seeing this, the deadly Natter stopped. Its left head suddenly opened its mouth, wanting to spew gas again to create smoke. But this time, only a few wisps of thin gas smoke drifted out of its mouth, like a candle flame without strength, scattered by the wind as soon as it spread. The deadly Natter itself was also stunned, tilting its left head, seemingly realizing something, then both heads recoiled slightly. Seeing this, Lin's lips curved into a smile, a flash of understanding in his eyes. After the continuous gas spewing and explosions just now, the deadly Natter probably had no gas left in its body, temporarily preventing it from spewing a sufficient amount of gas. Now, Lin growled, his feet pushing off fiercely, charging towards the deadly Natter like an arrow released from a bowstring. By the time the deadly Natter reacted, Lin was already in front of it, the stone hammer in his hand whistling through the air as he slammed it fiercely onto the right, igniting head. Thump. With another dull thud, the deadly Natter roared in pain, trying to ram Lin with its head, but Lin flexibly dodged to the side, simultaneously swinging the hammer to strike its leg scales. After several consecutive hammer strikes, the deadly Natter's movements became increasingly sluggish, its scales cracking under the blows, clearly having lost its previous ferocity. It looked at Lin, who was pressing closer, a hint of fear flashing in its eyes, and slowly retreated. Lin gave it no chance to breathe, continuing his pursuit, each hammer swing precisely landing on its weak points. Finally, the deadly Natter could no longer hold on, letting out an unwilling growl, and turned to flee towards the dragon prison. Lin followed closely. The moment the deadly Natter rushed into the dragon prison, he quickly stepped forward and pushed the heavy prison door back, locking it with a click. Lin leaned against the prison door, panting heavily, his arms slightly sore from the continuous hammering, but a victorious smile appeared on his face. Gabber, on the high platform, watched this scene with great satisfaction, shouting loudly, "Well done, Lin." The surrounding crowd also cheered, their earlier fear replaced by excitement. Lin leaned against the fence of the dragon training arena, toying with the stone hammer in his hand, but his brows were tightly furrowed. The battle scene just now replayed repeatedly in his mind, and a question became clearer and clearer: that's not right. In the original story, the deadly Natter clearly only has one head that can spew gas, and the other is only responsible for igniting it. He subconsciously activated the dragon-taming power within him, and a faint glow appeared on his fingertips. When he was entangled with the deadly Natter just now, he vaguely sensed that an abnormal energy flowed within this dragon, warm and restless, extremely similar to the energy he had felt at the ley line node in the mountain forest before. Is it because of the ley line energy? Lin murmured to himself, his eyes gradually sharpening. After training, Hiccup went to the edge of the sinkhole with his shield and quietly peered down. The Night Fury was curled up in an open space by the pond, seemingly asleep, its broken tail fin occasionally swaying gently. Hiccup took a deep breath, put away his shield, and cautiously climbed down the vines on the pit wall. When he reached the bottom of the pit, Hiccup emerged from between two rocks, holding his shield. The shield suddenly got stuck, and Hiccup had no choice but to squat and crawl out from under it. Hearing the movement, the Night Fury suddenly opened its eyes, its black vertical pupils instantly locking onto Hiccup. Hiccup's heart fluttered, his steps faltered, and the fish in his arms almost dropped. He slowly held up the fish, his voice extremely soft. I brought you food. Do you want to try some? The night fury didn't attack immediately. It just tilted its head, its black vertical pupils fixed on Hiccup, its gaze shifting between his face and the fish in his hand. Its eyes held a hint of wariness, like the instinctive caution towards an unfamiliar intruder, yet mixed with a touch of curiosity, as if pondering what this human held in his hand. Suddenly, its gaze swept across the dagger hanging from Hiccup's waist, its silver blade reflecting a faint light. The next second, the night fury's forelimbs suddenly lowered, its scales instantly bristled, a low warning growl rumbled in its throat, and its vertical pupils narrowed into sharp slits. The curiosity from before vanished, leaving only intense hostility. Hiccup's heart constricted sharply. He quickly stopped, raised his hands above his head to signal no ill intent, and with trembling fingertips, he picked up the dagger's hilt and carefully tossed it to the ground. With a crisp clank, the dagger landed on the pebbles, but the night fury's body remained tense. It suddenly turned its head, quickly gestured towards the pond, its black pupils fixed on the dagger on the ground, clearly indicating, throw it into the water. Hiccup dared not delay. He quickly stepped forward and kicked the dagger into the pond with his toe. With a plop, the dagger sank to the bottom, and ripples spread across the water's surface. The night fury stared at the water's surface for a few seconds, confirming the threat was gone. Its tense body slowly relaxed, its vertical pupils gradually returned to an oval shape, and its front paws gently lifted. It sat down like a large feline, but its gaze never left Hiccup. Hiccup sighed in relief and slowly moved forward, holding the fish high, trying to make his movements seem harmless, fearing that a single misstep would enrage this legendary night fury. The night fury stared at the fish in his hand for a long while, then looked up at Hiccup. After a moment of hesitation, it cautiously stood up, its forelimbs landing silently, and slowly approached step by step. It first extended its wet nose and gently touched the fish, making Hiccup instinctively hold his breath. After confirming there was no danger, the night fury didn't immediately bite. Instead, it looked up at Hiccup, its black eyes showing a hint of anticipation, as if waiting for him to offer the food. Hiccup looked at the smooth interior of its mouth and suddenly froze. Huh. I remember you had teeth before, didn't you? Seeing him hesitate, the night fury seemed to lose patience. Its mouth suddenly made a click, and several rows of sharp teeth instantly popped out, dazzlingly fast. It snatched the fish and retreated, then turned and quickly began to eat. Hiccup was so startled by the sudden change that he stumbled backward repeatedly, almost falling. His heart pounded wildly. Once his emotions calmed down, Hiccup watched the night fury eat and quietly breathed a sigh of relief. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, falling on its black scales, giving them a soft sheen. As it ate, its head swayed slightly, and its eyes softened considerably. It wasn't as fierce and terrifying as the legends claimed. Instead, it exuded a touch of charming clumsiness. The night fury quickly finished the fish, licked its dragon mouth, and turned to look at Hiccup. As if remembering something, its stomach suddenly rumbled. The next second, a slimy latter half of a fish was spat out, landing precisely on Hiccup's open palm. Hiccup stared blankly at the slimy fish in his hand, then looked up at the night fury. The night fury tilted its head, its gaze switching between the fish and him, as if saying, "This is for you." No, no way. Hiccup's mouth twitched as he looked at the fish in his palm, a fishy smell wafting towards him. He hesitated for a long time, and under the night fury's expectant gaze, he bit off a small piece, forcing himself to. The pungent, fishy taste instantly exploded in his mouth, accompanied by a heavy, slimy sensation. Hiccup's cheeks puffed out. He barely managed not to vomit, his face turning crimson. He stiffly nodded at the night fury, making a muffled, sound. Seeing this, the night fury made a satisfied swallowing motion, its eyes showing a hint of encouragement. Hiccup closed his eyes, his face full of resignation, and forced himself to swallow the fish in his mouth. Then he abruptly opened his mouth and gasped for air, the lingering fishy taste still clinging to his throat. The human and the dragon just stared at each other in silence, the atmosphere strangely harmonious. Hiccup looked at the night fury's docile appearance, and a hint of courage gradually grew within him. He tentatively reached out, wanting to touch it. The night fury lowered its head, sniffed his outstretched hand, then looked up at Hiccup, suddenly letting out a low growl and fiercely snapping at him. Not a real attack, but more like a warning. Hiccup quickly withdrew his hand. The Night Fury then turned and ran off to an open space in the corner of the sinkhole, where it spat a small ball of blue plasma dragon breath onto the ground. The dragon breath left a faint scorching mark on the ground. It circled the mark, then coiled its body, buried its head in its wings, and ignored Hiccup, revealing only a section of its broken tail fin, gently swaying in the sunlight. The twilight's afterglow filtered through the gaps in the leaves at the top of the sinkhole, casting dappled warm orange light and painting the ground in a soft golden hue. The Night Fury was hanging upside down from a thick branch, its long tail wrapped around it, its head swaying slightly, just waking up from its sleep. It groggily opened its black pupils and immediately caught sight of the figure at the bottom of the pit. Hiccup was sitting on a smooth, round stone, holding a thin twig, his head bowed as he slowly drew something in the damp soil, his expression utterly focused. Curiosity instantly captivated the black dragon. Its tail gently loosened, and it landed silently on the ground like a light feather, tiptoeing closer to Hiccup. It nudged its head against his shoulder, its black eyes unblinkingly fixed on the marks on the ground, occasionally tilting its head to ponder. Hiccup suddenly heard a faint rustling beside him. He turned his head and couldn't help but laugh aloud. The Night Fury, he noticed, had somehow picked up a large branch, thicker than his arm, and was clumsily mimicking him, using its claws to drag the branch back and forth on the ground. After a few strokes, it would look up at Hiccup's face, then down at its artwork, its expression serious yet tinged with an endearing clumsiness. A moment later, the Night Fury dropped the branch and squatted beside the marks it had drawn, craning its head to examine them, much like a little artist admiring its masterpiece, its tail proudly sweeping the ground. Hiccup stood up and looked, instantly amused. The Night Fury had drawn a circle of flowers, with wobbly lines, their branches haphazardly branching out, perfectly encircling the spot where he had been sitting. He was so engrossed that he accidentally stepped on the drawn line. Hiss! The Night Fury instantly bared its sharp teeth, a low warning growl rumbling in its throat, and its black pupils narrowed into thin slits. Hiccup jumped in fright and quickly lifted his foot. The Night Fury immediately retracted its teeth, its eyes returning to a calm state, though it still stared at his foot, as if supervising. Hiccup became intrigued. He tentatively stepped on the line again, and the Night Fury immediately bared its teeth once more. When he withdrew his foot, the warning instantly vanished. After several repeated attempts, he finally figured out the pattern and couldn't help but find this legendary Night Fury a bit cute. He carefully took steps, sometimes turning to go around the lines, sometimes taking a small hop, avoiding those flower lines, as if navigating a maze. When he finally stepped out of the flower circle, Hiccup happily turned to share with the Night Fury, but as he turned, his breath hitched abruptly. The Night Fury had somehow moved right in front of him, so close that he could see his own reflection in its pupils. The human and the dragon just gazed at each other in silence, the sunlight weaving faint specks of light between them. Hiccup took a deep breath and slowly extended his hand, summoning his courage. The Night Fury lowered its head, gently sniffed his palm, then voluntarily pressed its wet nose against it. The cool sensation warmed Hiccup's heart. But before he could savor it for more than a few seconds, the Night Fury suddenly retreated, turned, and ran off, its tail swishing. It quickly squatted back under the branch it had been hanging from, leaving Hiccup standing there, the warmth of its nose still lingering on his palm, a faint smile involuntarily curving his lips. Night fell like a heavy black cloth over Burke Island. The bonfire on the watchtower platform burned brightly, its flickering flames casting a warm glow all around. The teenagers sat around the fire, each clutching sizzling roasted meat. Golden grease dripped from their fingertips, splashing tiny sparks into the fire, and the air was filled with the aroma of meat and the char of charcoal. Gobber hobbled over, roasted meat skewered on his wooden prosthetic hand, his wooden prosthetic leg making a thump-thump sound as he stepped on the wooden planks. He casually picked up a skewer of crispy roasted lamb ribs from beside the fire, took a big bite, and grease ran down the corners of his mouth. He grinned, revealing his rough teeth. Full. Good, I'll tell you how I lost my hand and leg. Hearing this, everyone stopped chewing and leaned in curiously, their roasted meat still steaming in their hands. Hiccup took a bite of roasted meat, but his ears were perked up straight, while Astrid wiped the grease from the corner of her mouth and urged, "Hurry, tell us, we're listening." 10 years ago, I chased a monstrous nightmare into the Black Forest. Gabber tapped his wooden prosthetic, a hint of self-mockery in his voice. That beast's dragon breath burned through my shield, and when I wasn't looking, it bit off my left hand in one go. He paused. He raised his remaining right arm and shook it. I was in so much pain I almost fainted, but I still used my last bit of strength to chop off its wing with an axe. Watching it drag its crippled wing and escape into the woods, I had only one thought: that fool must be going back to brag to its kind about how delicious my hand was. Ha ha ha. The teenagers burst into laughter. Snotlout laughed so hard he almost spat out the roasted meat in his mouth, quickly covering his mouth but his shoulders still shaking uncontrollably. Gabber laughed along with them, his smile full of the broad-mindedness that comes with enduring hardships. As the laughter gradually subsided, he took another bite of lamb ribs, his tone growing a little somber. "So, guess what? A month later, while hunting by the sea, I encountered an even fiercer deadly natter. That fellow seemed to have come specifically to reminisce, and without a word, it pounced on me, biting off my right leg in one go." Everyone gasped, forgetting to chew their roasted meat, their eyes filled with tension. Gabber, however, casually patted his wooden prosthetic and continued, "At that time, I was lying on the beach, blood pooling everywhere. The deadly natter was about to take another bite, and I seized the opportunity, staring intently at its spread wings." Gabber suddenly tightened his grip on his battle axe, a fierce glint in his eyes. "It thought I'd be easy to bully without hands and feet, but our Viking ferocity is never in our limbs. The moment it lowered its head, I used all my strength and fiercely chopped off the root of its wing. A dragon without wings is a beast without claws or teeth, trapped on the ground, waiting to die." His voice was loud, making the surrounding bonfire flicker. That deadly natter fell onto the beach, flapping its single remaining wing trying to escape. I dragged my broken leg over, picked up my fallen battle axe, and one blow after another, I finally butchered it. Gabber threw the gnawed lamb rib bones back into the fire, and sparks flew high. "Dragons, they look fierce, but without the ability to fly, they're trapped on the ground, just waiting to die. But we Vikings are different. Even if we lose our hands and feet, as long as we have a breath left, we can pick up a weapon and fight." Only Hiccup and Lynn exchanged glances, each harboring their own thoughts. Hiccup was full of concern for Night Fury and his determination to build a tail fin, while Lynn knew that Hiccup and Night Fury had already established initial trust. As night deepened, the bonfire gradually weakened, and the teenagers dispersed. Hiccup and Lynn exchanged glances, each walking home with their own thoughts. Lynn's steps were light, still thinking of Mira in the wooden cabin. He pulled out the roasted meat and fresh fish he had specially saved from his embrace and quickened his pace. Pushing open the wooden cabin door, a small black figure immediately pounced. It was Mira. It rubbed against Lynn's ankles, its golden vertical pupils shining in the dim light, and a whining, coquettish sound came from its throat, clearly having waited impatiently. "Don't rush, I brought you something delicious," Lynn said with a smile, squatting down and offering the fish to Mira. Usually, Mira would devour it immediately, but today, it uncharacteristically nudged the fish with its nose, not taking a direct bite. Instead, it looked up at Lynn, then down at the fish, its small head tilted slightly, as if pondering something. Lynn was just feeling strange when he saw Mira pick up the fish, take 2 steps back, then suddenly lift its head and flick the fish into the air. Immediately after, it opened its small mouth and gently exhaled a breath towards the falling fish. A small, dark red dragon breath spewed from its mouth, like a miniature fireball, accurately hitting the fish in midair. Lynn subconsciously recoiled his hand. Although he was 2 steps away from Mira, he had already prepared himself for the heat wave. After all, dragon breath that could instantly cook things would never be low in temperature. But the expected scorching heat did not come, only a faint warmth brushed his cheek. But the next second, the sight before him made his pupils contract sharply. Sizzle, with a soft sound, the fresh fish, originally moist, lost its luster the moment the dragon breath touched it. Its skin visibly turned black and crispy at a rapid pace, finally becoming a completely charred block. It dropped to the ground with a thud, still emitting faint wisps of smoke, and even the surrounding air carried a burnt smell. Mira stared at the charred block on the ground, its golden pupils suddenly contracting, frozen in place. It tilted its head and watched for a long time, then looked up at Lin, its small tail unconsciously drooping, emitting a wronged whimper, as if wondering, why did the fish turn out like this? Lin was also stunned for a long time, unable to recover. He stared wide-eyed at the charred block on the ground, then at the bewildered Mira, a storm raging in his heart. Mira, only a few days old, already possessed such abilities, which completely exceeded his understanding. Is this what it means to be called a forbidden existence? Lin stared at the charred block on the ground, his voice full of awe. He had seen all the dragons on Burke Island, even the fiercest monstrous nightmares flames couldn't instantly carbonize fish. Yet, Mira, only a few days old, had dragon breath that could instantly carbonize fish. Such power had long surpassed the scope of ordinary dragons. He reached out and touched Mira's head. His fingertips could feel the warm energy contained beneath its scales, making him even more certain, this little fellow was truly extraordinary. Mira stared at the charred block, its golden pupils narrowed into thin lines, whimpering plaintively, its small tail sweeping back and forth on the ground. Seeing this, Lin suddenly had an idea. He got up and brought a pile of dry branches from the corner of the wooden cabin, built a simple bonfire on the ground, and then took out a flint and struck it, creating sparks with a clack. The flames gradually ignited, and the warm light illuminated Mira's curious eyes. It moved closer to the fire, but then recoiled as if afraid of the heat. Thanks for watching.